Good morning. Good morning. Hello. Bonjour, bienvenue. Welcome, good morning. Bonjour. Hello. I'm delighted to be back with you today for this year's International Day of Women at Multilateralism at UNESCO to moderate our discussions this morning under the theme of gender equality to solve the climate emergency. I'm Nadia Massi, I'm a broadcast journalist at France 24 here in Paris, and I'll be guiding us all through the programme today. And in just a moment, I'll hand the floor to our opening speakers. But before I do, I thought I'd very quickly give you a rundown of our plan today. We'll hear from a range of speakers here at the podium and in our panel discussions about that intersection between gender and climate. And I think we will explore not only the ways that women bear the brunt of the climate emergency, because we already know that they do. Crucially then, we'll explore why it is that UNESCO believes that striving, that pushing for greater gender equality will actually help us in the existential fight we face now against climate change. So that's the plan, that's what we're doing, and even though I have no doubt our panelists will be excellent, our speakers here at the podium will be excellent, we're not gathering today just to talk. Instead, the goal of UNESCO today is to come up with concrete recommendations for how the gender perspective can be better integrated into climate policy at the multilateral level within the framework of the UN Ocean Decade, which we'll talk about much more during the programme. And as part of that, UNESCO also wants to hear from you, from the audience today. A bit later on, we'll show a QR code up on the screen, and we'll get you to use your phone to note it down, and we'll ask you a question along the lines of, what's the one thing that you believe UNESCO needs to do more of to help women who are living on the front lines of our climate emergency? We'll project the results as well, we'll talk about them, so you're really a part of this conversation. We will hear then from the experts, we'll hear from you, and we'll also hear from the next generation, from a couple of young voices, those who will inherit our planet. Because while our session is going on today in this part of UNESCO, in this room, elsewhere in the building, a group of secondary school children are right now working on a fresco, a sort of art project, to tease out their own thoughts about those connections between gender and climate. And a few of them will be on the stage a bit later on to present their ideas. So lots to look forward to. Let's get straight into it. And I'm very pleased, first of all, then to welcome to the stage Lydia Brito. She's the Assistant Director General for the Natural Sciences sector here at UNESCO. Welcome.
Thank you very much, and good morning. Dear President of the General Conference, Madame Simona Mirela Miculescu, dear Madame Michelle Bachelet, Excellencies, distinguished speakers, ladies and gentlemen. On behalf of the Director General, I would like to welcome you here today to celebrate the 3rd International Day of Women in Multilateralism. The day is unique. Our member states supported it and adopted it in 2021, following the proposal put forward by the distinguished ambassador, permanent delegate of Gabon, to UNESCO. This event offers us a precious and far too rare opportunity to come together to celebrate the role of women in multilateralism. It also brings us face to face with the distressing reality that persists. According to UN Women, women in public decision-making positions are still in the minority. Only 26 countries have a female head of state or government. The same applies to the private sector. It is estimated that the share of women in leadership positions will only reach 30% by 2050. This situation is not inevitable. We can overcome these obstacles with the determination to act without a delay to build equality in and through multilateralism. This presupposes, first and foremost, that multilateral bodies such as ours make commitments to gender equality, and this is what we are doing. This year, we are focusing our attention on a subject that is at the heart of UNESCO's mandate, that is the climate crisis, and on women's participation in solutions to climate change. As we know, our society is facing an extraordinary environmental challenge, which will determine the future of life on Earth. And yet, all too often, women are left out of the decision that affects the future of humanity and the planet, even though their contribution is essential. Having to say so is in itself an aberration. By a way of illustration, at COP28, women's voices remain in the minority, with only 15 women among the 133 participating leaders. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, the climate crisis unfolding before our eyes may be universal, but that doesn't mean that it affects everyone equally. By 2050, nearly 160 million women and girls are likely to be pushed into poverty as a result of climate change, and nearly 240 million more women and girls, according to population projections, will suffer from food insecurity, 100 million more than men and boys. Women are also 4 times more likely to die as a result of natural disasters, mainly because of structural inequalities in access to and control over resources. The data on gender inequalities provide us with the evidence needed to design effective public policies. This, for example, is one of the objectives of our World Water Assessment Program. Thanks to this initiative, indicators, a methodology and tools that include the gender perspective in water issues have been put in place in 21 countries. Their aim is to provide managers and decision makers with readable data to formulate and implement sustainable and relevant policies in the water sector. Over and above the disproportionate impact of climate change on women and girls, we also see the persistent stereotypes that leave little room for women in science. The resulting gender bias prevent women from having access to scientific studies and careers. We see this in our own data, with only 33% of female researchers and 37% of oceanographic staff being women. By perpetuating these stereotypes and biases, we are depriving ourselves of the talent of half of humanity. This is why, for the past 25 years, UNESCO has decided to support women and girls in their pursuit of careers in the sciences and to give recognition to their talents through the L'Oréal UNESCO Awards. Over the past 25 years, under 27 international recipients, 330 young international talents, and more than 4,000 young researchers have received this prize. They are all exceptional women scientists who act as role models for younger people. The training of water professionals has also become an important aspect of UNESCO's Intergovernmental Hydrological Program. One of its projects was aimed to training women to interpret satellite images in order to predict climate events, such as floods or droughts, so that preventive measures can be taken more easily. Another noteworthy initiative which places humans at the heart of solution to the climate crisis is the work on the issue of glaciers in Central Asia. In 2022, UNESCO launched a regional project enabling 9 young women aged between 18 and 25 from Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, Uzbekistan, Tajikistan, and Turkmenistan to explore the scientific issues underlining the melting of the ice on the Golubin Glacier in the Alba-Arsha National Park in Kyrgyzstan. The participants received training on climate and environmental change, as well on natural disasters and disaster risk management in high mountain sites. As you can see, UNESCO is working to systematically integrate the gender dimension as its global priority in all of its programs. We are doing this hand in hand with our member states. Between 2022 and 2023, 62 countries will have strengthened their capacities to become more resilient in the face of climate-related disasters and to resolve the specific difficulties encountered by women and girls in the face of this phenomenon. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, highlighting women's potential to respond to the climate crisis is not just a question of social justice. It is an imperative for protecting the planet, empowering people, increasing prosperity, building peace, and fostering new partnerships, the 5 Ps that make it possible to achieve the Sustainable Development Goals. UNESCO is fully committed to ensure that women's voice, experience, and leadership are an integral part of the solutions to the climate crisis. Today's debate will enable us to formulate recommendations that will place gender equality at the center of the multilateral responses in order to increase the participation of women in the fields of science and the environment. Your recommendations will help us to ensure that gender equality is taken into account in decision-making and in every forum where advocacy can make a difference. We will present them at the UN Decade of the Ocean Conference in Barcelona this April, the World Press Freedom Day Conference in Santiago in May this year, the World Science Forum in November this year also in Budapest, and the UN Ocean Conference in June 2025. Thank you very much for your attention, and what a pleasure to welcome you again. Thank you.
Lydia Brito, thank you very much. I now give the floor to Simona Mirela-Miralescu, the President of the 42nd session of the General Conference. Welcome.
Excellencies, Admirable dear Michelle Bachelet, distinguished delegates, ADG, Brito, distinguished speakers, ladies and gentlemen, I must confess, it is a joy, a delight to speak before you at this high-level forum. Celebrating the International Day for Women in Multilateralism is specifically meaningful for me on a personal level. It reminds me of my 33 years of my diplomatic career and the moment that my country enthusiastically joined this initiative in 2022, led by the Ambassador and Permanent Delegate of Gabon, my friend, dear Rachel Anik Ogula Akiko. Above all, I would like to remind you of the objective of this International Day, recognizing the key role played by women in promoting human rights, peace, and sustainable development within the multilateral system. That also includes international and regional organizations, as well as other entities with an international scope. Therefore, I would like to pay tribute on this day to my dear colleagues, ambassadors, all women diplomats, and to all the international female staff within the UN system that defend the strong values, national and universal values, by taking action each day to advance peace and international cooperation, and who aim to solve global problems and to encourage the respect for human rights and fundamental freedoms for all. a special expression of gratitude and congratulations to all female staff members at UNESCO for their excellent work in implementing our global priority, gender equality, and for their unwavering support to member states in the various competence sectors within the competence of the organization.
Ambiance, a topic of crucial importance, the powerful intersection between gender equality and the climate emergency. It is well known, and the representative, the Director General DG Brito, has just provided concrete figures. Climate change disproportionately affects women, especially in marginalized communities. Women comprise 80% of the population displaced by climate change and extreme weather. When displaced, women and girls are exposed to an increased risk of gender-based violence. When climate change affects income, girls' education is often the first thing families sacrifice. Girls are pulled out of school to help with water and food security or to take care of others. Gender disparity extends to STEM fields, government leading positions, and parliamentary important roles, to name but a few. Urgent and resolute action is therefore needed to address the situation, this situation actually, and demonstrate that gender equality is not just a moral imperative, but it stands as a strategic necessity in our collective endeavor to combat the climate emergency. Taking action means empowering women and integrating their unique perspectives into sustainable resource management and disaster preparedness, thus enhancing community resilience. For example, UNESCO's vast network of designated sites. They are key assets for experimenting new innovative solutions by putting gender equality at the forefront of initiatives and actions on the ground. Women and girls are part and multipliers of the solutions because they have the potential to offer unique knowledge and experiences and creativity that can help solve climate-related ecosystem crises. Taking action implies also ensuring access to quality education for all girls and women, equipping them to make informed decisions about their families, their communities, their societies. We should aim to offer more opportunities to girls and women everywhere to pursue STEM education and scientific careers. They should be enabled to drive research and innovation in new areas and develop a paradigm shift in addressing climate change challenges. Furthermore, taking action means advancing gender-inclusive decision-making processes in climate negotiations. We all know how fantastic negotiators women are. This will result in a more comprehensive, sustainable, and socially just solutions. Ladies and gentlemen, let us firmly grasp the fact that achieving gender equality is not merely about addressing impact. It is an indispensable catalyst for effective climate action, solutions, and concrete results. As we work towards a more sustainable and equitable future, I encourage all member states to recognize the interconnectedness of these challenges and embrace solutions that advance gender equality and empower all individuals, regardless of gender. I would also like to make an appeal to all women working in multilateral affairs and beyond to act together in cooperation and solidarity, guided by the words of the Chilean writer Isabel Allende. I can promise you that women working together, connected, informed, and educated, can bring peace and prosperity to this forsaken planet. We just have to take our chances. As another famous Chilean writer said, the great poet Pablo Neruda, and I know, Madam Bachelet, that you love to quote him usually, I remember from your wonderful speeches, he used to say, life offers 1,000 chances. All you have to do is take one. By doing so, we will not only create a fairer world for our children, but also pave the way to the more resilient and sustainable planet we all dream of and act for. I wish you every success and a very fruitful debate. Thank you.
Thank you very much. It's time now for our keynote speech, and at least in my view, it's hard to think of a woman better placed to give it. Chile's first female president, a politician who's been a force for change on women's rights and on the environment in Chile and on the world stage, the latter as the first executive director of UN Women and then later as the UN High Commissioner for Human Rights. I'm talking, of course, about Michelle Bachelet. Thank you and welcome.
Good morning. Dear Madam President of the General Conference, Madam Simona Mirella Miculescu, dear Lidia Brito, ADG representing the Director General, dear Excellencies, Permanent Representative, dear ADGs, ladies and gentlemen, friends. Well, first of all, I would like to thank you for the invitation to participate in the commemoration of the International Day of Women in Multilateralism. Multilateralism is not only a method of cooperation, it has also been a way of organizing the international system and has achieved results that have given way to great advances. And while at the same time always promoting and strengthening human rights, because the struggle for human rights is one that never ends. Perhaps some might wonder why it is necessary to have a day to commemorate women in multilateralism. And here we must emphasize that this day allows us to recognize the essential role that women have played in the promotion of human rights, peace, and sustainable development within the multilateral system. And of course, the idea is to continue to promote greater representation of women in positions of power and decision-making in multilateralism so that it also works for women and girls. I was in Madrid in a seminar with a group that I participated in. It's called Global World Leaders' Voices, that intends exactly to promote the participation of women. And the data is really not good. I mean, even though all the efforts done, only like 13% of people in decision-making position are female women. So we have a lot of work to do. Today, I have been invited to address a central issue on the global agenda, the climate emergency, and how gender equality plays a central role. I wish to begin by recognizing UNESCO's work by having multilateral action to promote gender equality as one of their priorities. They're doing hard work, mentoring young women scientists and promoting gender-sensitive environmental actions with special attention to biodiversity, water, and oceans. As UNESCO Director General Audrey Azoulay has said, we must make the women involved in multilateralism a source of inspiration, I will quote her, a source of inspiration that for all those who wish to contribute to this change. End of quote. It is important to note that women have played a role in multilateralism and gender equality since its inception. In fact, since the drafting and signing of the United Nations Charter in 1945, there has been several women who played a central role, and without them, it would not be as inclusive as we know it. You usually hear about Eleanor Roosevelt, who was instrumental in the drafting of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, but there are several others I would like to mention briefly. Marie-Hélène Lefaucheux, from here in France, advocated for the inclusion of gender equality in Article 2. Hansa Mehta, from India, succeeded in changing the text from all men to all human beings are born free and equal. Minerva Bernardino, a diplomat from the Dominican Republic, was instrumental in getting equality of men and women included in the preamble. Lakshmi Menon, a delegate from India, passionately advocated for the principle of gender equality to be included throughout the document. Without these women, the Universal Declaration of Human Rights would not be the guide to equality and freedom that is today. At that time, it was called, we spoke only about men. Well, when I was at UN Women, I came here and talked to French Parliament. I tried to change that, but they say that the French Academy did not accept that. It's only les droits de l'homme. I don't know if they change it afterwards. I hope so. Women have always contributed and will continue to do so, but we need fewer barriers and more impetus for the participation. Today, one of the worst threats to humanity is what has been called the triple planetary crisis. Because it's not only about climate change. Climate change is one of the components, but we also have pollution and the loss of biodiversity, and this is really important. With each passing day, our collective delays and inaction bring us closer to an alarming global catastrophe. This is something I have spoken about with great emphasis throughout my career, but especially in my time as UN High Commissioner for Human Rights. This is a crisis that we cannot ignore because it is affecting us. It is affecting the lives of millions of people around the world, and it is our responsibility to take charge. Concrete action is paramount to our very survival. In the last 20 years, the number of climate-related disasters has almost doubled, according to the United Nations Office for Disaster Risk Reduction. And we have seen, I would say since a couple of years, how this has been massified and how frequent all these disasters are. So we're at a point where mitigation is no longer sufficient, but we must adapt because the promised causes are already a reality. In fact, at COP28 last year, the parties reached a historic agreement on the first day, the creation of a loss and damage fund. States must implement their international commitment and increase their efforts to fulfill them. We will all suffer far worse effects from the environmental crisis if we do not work together. One thing that evidence has shown is that climate emergencies are not gender neutral. The degradation of the planet's natural system has, as both of you already have said, a disproportionate effect on women and girls. By 2050, according to UN Women, climate change will push 158 million more women and girls into poverty and cause 236 million more women to go hungry. In addition, climate change is exacerbating water scarcity, increasing the burden on women and girls to collect and treat water. At the local water management level, it has been shown that involving women in the planning and implementation of water systems creates services that are better adapted to their needs and resources. Let us not forget that women and girls are not only victims, but also agents of change. Only by advancing gender equality can we advance solutions to address the climate emergency. The increased representation of women in political and business leadership has led to intensified action to reduce the world's carbon emissions. However, according to UN Women, in 2023, only 26 countries had women holding positions of head of states or head of government. And there are only 13 countries where women hold 50% or more of the positions of ministers leading political areas. In parliaments, only 26% of parliamentarians in the single or lower houses were women, a figure that has increased from 11% in 1995. 2024 will be an important year to hopefully improve this gap and deepen democracy because there will be at least 88 elections worldwide. Here in Europe, 27 European Union member countries will vote in the June parliamentary elections. According to some estimates that have been reported in the press, all of these 83 elections will be the equivalent to more than 4 billion people voting. So this is essential because at the current rate, according to UN data, it would take about 140 years for women to be equally represented in positions of power and leadership in the workplace, and 47 years to achieve equal representation in parliament. Women represent approximately half of the world's population. So we represent half of the world's potential for change and development. Chile is a country who loves football. So when I try to convince people who are not so gender sensitive, I will always talk in the language that they could feel more inspired. So I would say, when that year we won the Copa America. So I said, could we win this if we only play with half of the team? It's impossible. If we need to respond to the challenges that we have, we need the whole team. So this is why it is so relevant that women and girls are seen as part of the solution, because they have the potential to offer knowledge, unique experiences, ideas and innovations that can help us solve the climate and ecosystem crisis. We must move towards the strategic engagement of women, and Simona was also mentioning the importance of starting with education and engaging girls in science, technology, engineering, and mathematics, STEM careers, especially in the natural sciences, particularly water and ocean sciences, so they can contribute knowledge and develop skills to find solutions and lead change. But there's also a need for education and awareness raising to generate a critical mass that can exercise accountability on governments and also on the companies responsible for pollution. A recent review of national climate action plans found that only 55 countries have specific climate adaptation measures that reference gender equality, and only 23 recognize women as agents of change to accelerate progress on climate commitment. It should also be noted that there are women scientists who are at the forefront of efforts to find answers to climate change and environmental degradation. In my country, for a long time, we're doing what's called the Congress of the Future. And one of the speakers was Spanish oceanographer Cristina Romera Castillo, who spoke about how saving the oceans is a challenge for survival. She talked about how the oceans not only provide food, but also absorb the greenhouse effect, reduce heat, and mitigate climate change. She gave a shocking figure. Only 7% of the global ocean is protected, but only 2.7% is strictly protected. The UN goal is to protect 30% of the oceans. I would like to highlight that Chile has already 43% of its judicial waters under protection. That is, we are better than the global average because we really understood the importance of protecting, to developing marine protected areas. Last year, after a decade of negotiations, the agreement on the conservation and sustainable use of marine biodiversity beyond national jurisdiction, BBNJ, was signed. Chile played an active role in promoting ambitious objectives and coordinating effectively with regional and sectoral bodies related to the high seas, and we look forward to hosting the BBNJ Secretariat in Valparaiso. Just a few days ago, Chile became the first country to ratify this agreement, which to enter into force must be ratified by 60 nations. So I hope the ambassadors here can be very active in promoting this signature. Let's hope that this happens as soon as possible. Women as agents of change and promoters of this type of policies also have a key role to play. Friends, climate justice cannot be achieved without gender justice. If we do not advance gender equality, we will not be able to advance in solving the climate crisis, neither probably the rest of the SDGs. Discrimination against women will only hinder urgent responses to the climate emergency. Gender equality must be at the center of multilateral responses that seek to amplify women's participation in science, the environment, and the climate crisis. There are also so many women doing so many interesting things, such as those participating here today. We need to increase and strengthen this kind of leadership and provide global recognition. It is the only way for us to move forward in this fight that must unite us all on the same side to save our planet before it's too late. I thank you very much.
Michelle Bachelet, thank you very much. I think there's a moment for the three of you to take a quick photograph now before we start our first panel. Thank you very much to all three of you for some of those inspiring words to get us started today. And it is time now for our first panel discussion, where we'll hear from three women who are leading that fight against the climate emergency at the international level. And I'm hoping we'll hear from them sort of big picture, the scale of the challenges we face, why gender equality needs to be at the heart of the solution, and perhaps some tangible recommendations as well. So let me welcome them. Hemavati S. Shekhar, Nisreen Al-Sain, please join me here on the stage. And Fatou Jen, I hope, is joining us by video conference as well. Thank you as well. Welcome. Hello. Let me very briefly introduce all three of you, although I think there's more that I'm sure you want to say about the kind of work you do yourselves. Hemavati Shekhar is a lawyer. She's an academic as well. She works primarily in India on climate change and the law. She founded the Enact Earth Foundation and she previously served as the Global South focal point for UNGO and specializes in climate finance and in loss and damage. Welcome to you. Next to her here, Nisreen El-Sem, a scientist, an energy specialist. She's currently the chair of the UN Secretary General's Youth Advisory Group on Climate Change. And Fatou Dieng, if she is connected, well, she will be at some point, she's a climate advisor as well to the UN Secretary General. Unfortunately, she couldn't join us in person. She too previously led the UNGO forum, this one for women and gender. This was at some of the previous COPs. So welcome to you for this kind of scene-setting conversation. And first of all, look, all three of you are working on climate change in your home countries in Sudan and India, in Fatou's case in Gambia. But first of all, I'm interested in why you think sort of globally, internationally, we need gender-led or feminist solutions to climate change at the global level. Nisreen, perhaps you go first.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. Very good morning to you. I think I am more interested of asking why should we still ask why do we need a gender balance or equality in this forum? I mean, no one asks why do we need to eat or why do we need to breathe, or I think keep asking questions that they are now. We should have been in a position where these questions, common sense, it goes without saying. But we are not. That's the fact that we have to deal with. In general, and of course from my experience in Sudan, maybe most of you or all of you witnessed how Sudanese people led a very marvelous revolution in 2018, 2019, and how women were in the front line of that. Yet, when it was the time to actually put the civilian government, when it was time to give seats, only 4 women made it to, so 15%. While in the streets, you can see a minimum of 80%. Women, and it's not only in Sudan. It was in Asmara, in Eritrea. The army was most of them female fighters. It's the same. Do you see any prominent female in the Eritrean? It's the same in many places around the world, and of course, it's the same in climate change. Everyone is talking about the head of state picture, beginning of COP28. And for me, everyone asking why we don't have women leadership is like, we need to elect them first. It's a picture of head of states at COP28. So we need to have women head of state first so they can be in the picture of COP29 or whatever. So it starts deep in the grassroots of the communities where women are doing everything, especially from my culture and perspective, yet when it's up to be in the leadership roles, it's by far less. So pushing them up from down, it's the only way to get them up. I mean, it's...
Absolutely. Hamavathi, same question to you then. Why do we need gender-led solutions to climate change?
So maybe I'll come from a policy angle itself, but just building on the fact that, we don't have women leadership, and the fact that previous speakers mentioned about having women negotiators and stuff. International negotiations across all multilateral environment negotiations, we always put in this angle of having, a policy-making thing where bring in a gender lens. But when it comes to implementation, it always goes back to men implementing a gender-related policy thing, right? Because ultimately, women negotiators are empowered enough to have a policy about having a gender lens to solutions, how to deal with problems, everything about climate change. But then all of this implementation goes back to, countries. And who are the ones implementing or making laws or implementing these commitments? It goes back to men. So how can you really ensure that these commitments that are made internationally, especially about bringing gender equality and equity, are actually going to be implemented in its real sense, as a matter of fact? So that is where we also need to look at how we curate our policies itself. It's not just about bringing a gender lens. When you speak about ensuring, it's just not, that is where the leadership matters, ensuring that only women can speak for what happens to women. You can't have men implementing legislations or policies that speak for doing away with lack of gender equality itself.
Absolutely, Hemavathi, thank you. Fatu, are you with us? Perhaps not yet. Well, while we wait for Fatu, let me ask the two of you something kind of building on what you both just said. I gave a very brief resume of the kind of work you're both doing. You both work at an international level. You both work with the United Nations. You're both in these bodies. You're both working at COP. So what I want to understand from you is, to what extent, if any, is there a sort of institutional understanding and institutional knowledge within the United Nations at these big other multilateral bodies that we need women, we need that gender lens when we're talking about climate change? Has progress been made in the last few years at COP? I don't know, what do you think? Nisreen, you go first.
Thank you. It's a bit funny for me, this question, because I keep hearing it and there is never a good answer for that.
Be honest, it's all right.
Yeah, well, COP28 was my 10th COP. I mean, I feel like a dinosaur when it comes to that. I go to rooms and I hear them saying, remember that year when XYZ happened? I was like, yeah, I was there. Remember when we put the first agenda? I was like, yeah, I was there.
You're a young woman still.
Yeah, but never young for activism, huh?
Very true.
The thing is, I remember when we started, I started my going to COP, I was more on the activism side. So having stand-ups, doing demonstrations, working on different civil society frontiers and stuff. But then I noticed that COP is not really about the side events, although now it's become a big carnival, but the actual core of the COP is two things. First of all, meeting and advocating and so on, but the second, which is the most institutional, is the outcomes, the documents that we actually have. So I joined the delegation of Sudan. At that time, we were only two young ladies. I mean, there was other ladies, actually. The Sudan delegation is always full of ladies, which is a plus. But we faced another problem. Loss of the gender was actually the age. So I think now, when you are a young female, it's even worse. I'm not sure, but Her Excellency Michelle, maybe it became easy for you by time, because it doesn't for us, at least. And I think this is something that we need to discuss. It's not about how old are we. It's not about what we actually represent, because a lot of times we only get positions or things because just to look good on the panel, for example. I always tick a lot of boxes. So I'm a female, young, I was at least, from Global South, wearing hijab, so I'm a Muslim, so I represent all of the minorities somehow. But it should not be like this. It should be us being in the right place because we deserve it, because we have the credibilities, and there are a lot of women with a lot of credibilities. So going to your question, yes, there is progress, but it's not as it should. And we always talk about the gap, the gender action plan. Well, the gap have big gaps. And now we are trying to close these gaps by accessing finance, by accessing like supporting delegations to bring young women, but still they're not there. They're still...
Okay, closing the gap within the gaps then, Nisreen. Hemavathi, I wonder to what extent that chimes with you, your experiences at COP in recent years, institutional understanding, is it getting better, is it getting worse?
For me, I mean, I'm still a baby when it comes to COPs. I've been to 3 COPs. But when you go into a negotiation room itself, you barely find women in terms of, anytime it's a majority, it's But then how many, it's like, you know, how many people are actively speaking about commitment regarding gender equality or equity? And that rarely happens. Apart from that, we also have a civil society observer constituency called the Women and Gender Constituency as well, who push for this narrative. But in terms of policy making, one thing is when you have a room full of you know, people like majority men, how many, it comes down to like, you know, how many women feel comfortable in pushing that narrative and only having a negotiation discussion on gender equality and women itself amidst all the conversations we are having. Say, for example, if the negotiation is about climate financing, how easy or difficult is it for somebody or a negotiator to push for gender equality when we are speaking about climate finance conversation turning into commitments for like 198 parties, right? It's not an easy task, and mainstreaming this becomes very, very crucial. And we have made some progress, but it's never enough, you know, because how do you evaluate what is the right kind of progress you made? Because internationally, it's just the surface that we are touching. And only when you go to the ground do you realize what the real kind of impact of, you know, say, bring in a gender lens to climate solutions actually mean for the woman in a coastal community being impacted by climate change, who's probably going to lose her family or her livelihood because of climate change itself.
Thank you very much. I'll just ask again, Fatou Dieng, are you connected? Is she with us? Fatou, she's there, she's on the screen. Fatou, can you hear me? Okay, we'll come back to Fatou. You both touched on this already, but I sometimes think it's worth kind of explicitly spelling this out about the intersectional nature of the climate crisis. That is to say, the way that women and girls in the global south are disproportionately affected already. And perhaps, again, you touched on Sudan explicitly, Nisreen, but that intersection between gender, climate, and conflict as well. Just very quickly, kind of give us your thoughts on that before we look at some recommendations on what you think needs to be done.
Yes, thank you very much. Just like the women in climate change or gender in climate change, the topic of climate change, peace and security is also one of the things that for me as a person who experienced that firsthand in a country like Sudan, it goes without saying we should not still be asking or questioning how can climate change drive conflicts, because basically human beings are survival human beings, the survival creatures. They need food, they need water to survive, and if it's not, then these competitive skills will come out and people will definitely fight over resources. And if these resources are going down and down little by climate change, then of course it will drive conflict. But then let's put that on with, as you mentioned, the gender lens. For example, in Sudan. In many areas in Sudan, women actually do everything. They cultivate the land, they do the agriculture, they build the house, they hold the house, they cook, they have the babies, they raise the baby, everything. And the main job for men is to stay away from the houses under the trees to watch for hyenas or dogs or wolf or stuff like this. So if we, for a while or just for the one moment, covered how climate change impacts biodiversity and the fact that we don't have wolves anymore, we find that everything related to the human being's life is impacting the women, because it's the women's responsibility. If they used to walk 1 kilometer, for example, to get fresh water, with climate change now they have to walk 10 kilometers going and coming back. And this, of course, put the women in danger because there is no electricity in these places, there is no lighting. They are more open to sexual harassment, to rape, to all sorts of things because they just move away from where people are, where civilization are, where protection some sort of can be, and I put it between two quotations, protection. Also, we should very much talk about the climate justice and the biggest lens and how it's related to humans. And now there's a big slogan, which is just transition. And for me, slogans are always questionable. For example, the SDG slogan is leaving no one behind. And I always talk to DSG, Amina Mohammed, Her Excellency, and we always talk about it. It's like, DSG, people are already left behind. The slogan should be moving people who are behind to in front, because we can never talk about justice and put slogans like leaving no one behind where people, we see that some populations are very far from other populations. Another slogan is just transition. In a country like Sudan, for example, most of the African continent actually, only 30% have access to electricity or any sorts of energy that is not charcoal, for example. So what kind of transition are we talking about? What are we transiting from if there is no energy in the first place? My slogan, is, and I always use about energy, is just access, and how to make this access sustainable so not we have more emission. This is the climate justice and just transition that we are talking about, but we are not transiting, we are only accessing right now. And now again, how this related to gender. Basically, if there is no electricity, then there is no hospitals, there is no schools. Men have more possibility and tendency to move for another villages, another big cities. Culturally, women don't have this privileges in many places. So they have to stay in the small villages with their families until they get married, for example. They have to stay in the houses. Even delivery, the sexual and reproductive health is also very much neglected and very much threatened. To sum up my intervention here, in 2020 we had a very devastating flood. It was the worst in 100 years. And in 2020, I remember the biggest problem we faced was finding midwives for women who wants to deliver without having to cross to the other places because the flood cut all of the roads. So climate change is a development problem, is a justice problem, is a energy problem, is a gender problem. It's all in one place, and we have to deal with everything. Otherwise, we will not succeed because we will keep making small steps in one side and neglecting the other. And then by the time we go to the other, we have to do holistic approach to the problems and holistic solutions that feed into every single path. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Fatu, can you hear me?
I can.
Let's give it a go, Fatu. Your sound's in and out, but let's. I hope we can hear you, and I hope you can hear us. I don't know how much of the conversation you've heard already, but I want just very quickly for you to give us your kind of overview of the problem as you see it now in terms of why we need a gender-led solution to climate change, just briefly, and then I think we'll move on to some of your concrete ideas for what we can do.
Thank you so much. I briefly heard about what some of my colleagues have mentioned. I hope I'm very clear.
You're good.
Perfect. Yes, really unfortunate I can't make it in person, but quite an interesting conversation going on. And why we need a gender lens, I believe we all know, we've all seen, we've all heard, we've witnessed, and we've seen evidence, we've seen figures about the gender impacts of climate change, especially in the global south. All of us here in the panel actually come from the global south, where women continue to be the most vulnerable when climate-related impacts occur. In our side of the world, women and girls mostly depend on the natural environment to support themselves, to feed themselves, their families, and to sustain their lives and their livelihoods. In our parts of the world, when climate-related disasters occur, we see young girls, we see women actually put in situations that are very uncomfortable. These also are due to the social and cultural barriers that comes in our society, also more or less hindering women's growth and progress and the right to access a healthy environment. Again, coming from countries that we know contribute the least to the impacts of climate change, yet it's really difficult for this particular or this side of our world or our continent to be able to adapt effectively to the impacts of climate change. And again, women continue to be in this forefront when not only disasters occur, but they are also in the forefront, taking actions, taking charge to lead adaptation initiatives. I always say the face of climate change has the face of a woman because it is women that are always affected the most. And a recent UN report has shown that women and girls in the global south spend over 200 million hours every single day just to fetch water. And also when climate disasters occur, we have seen women and especially girls forced into early and forced marriage as a result of climate-related issues. We have seen how their level of education has also reduced or has been affected when climate disasters occur. We have seen an increase in gender-based violence issues, among others. So, for me, why we need to take action?
Go ahead, Fatou, we hear you.
Why we need to take action to address the growing climate crisis, especially using a gender lens, is because at the end of the day, it is women that are going to significantly help in ensuring that adaptation or climate-related solutions actually more or less reaches every single stakeholder or reaches the most vulnerable communities, because they are going to make sure that it is equitable and it is addressing the needs and the challenges that we continue to face on a daily basis. I've said this in several panels that I've been in. I come from a farming community, and in our farming sector, we use our agricultural proceeds to support our families. And again, in this farming sector, it is women that constitute the most. In the Gambia, women actually wake up as early as 4 a.m. every single day to go to their farmlands to actually get the proceeds and go to the market to sell and come back to support themselves and their families. So looking at all these challenges, looking at all these problems that women continue to face, especially in the global south, it is really important for us to take a gender lens in addressing the climate problems, because there is no climate justice, again, without gender equality. So all these things go hand in hand. If we want to address the climate crisis, we need to make sure we wear a gender lens or a gender equality lens to make sure that the most vulnerable, the most impacted are supported, because we can't talk about loss and damage, we can't talk about mitigation, adaptation, finance, etc., without making sure that it has gender-responsive actions and gender-sensitive actions. Because at the end of the day, we're going to go back to square zero in climate action if these things are actually not considered.
Hi, Fatou. It's Nasreen. Do you see me?
I can see you and Hema.
Is Muhammad crying in the background?
Yes, he's here. I think he wants to be seen. We were supposed to be there in person.
because this is the face I have when my baby cries when I am in virtual meetings. Like, oh my God, she had the same feature. And I think this is one of the challenges that we need to add on the gender in COPs or the multilateralism having women is our babies. Mohammed is 3 months younger than my baby, and we used to both have our babies with us in the corridors of the COPs and so on, because we don't get enough support to bring a family member, for example, to stay with the baby while we're working, we also don't get enough support to like have a kindergarten, for example, or a creche when we are in big meetings. So we always, I think that's why women are more brilliant. We always work with a quarter of a brain with the baby, quarter of a brain with the session, other quarter with the house and what's happening background, and the third quarter is with our studies and so on. And I always have this discussion with my husband, who's in the audience right now. And remember, because UN had a program called He for She, which is men supporting women. It was brilliant, but he's my he for she, and thank you for that. We always have this discussion, and he say, look, we are men, we think boxes. Please finish this topic, then go to the other topic. I was like, okay, then you are very primitive creatures. And he said, what? I said, it's simple. If we want to buy a new laptop, a computer, okay? And you have a computer that's working with Pentium processor, which is processing one topic and then go to the other. And you have a Core i7 new brand laptop that deals with 7 topics at the same time with a very fast speed. Which laptop will be using? I choose the Core i7. So that's why we should choose women. Guys, it's simple. It goes without saying. We are more advanced creatures.
Okay,
I'm a physicist. I'm not a biologist, but I think so.
Okay, Nisri, thank you very much. A little bit of a humor to sort of power us forward now as we look to some of your recommendations, I think, for how we can try and tackle those challenges that all three of you have spelled out so passionately. Hemavathi, let me bring you in here then. I'm interested in what recommendations you have as to how we can better integrate gender justice and climate justice, particularly when it comes to climate financing. That's an issue you work on a lot. How can we get financiers to think more about this, to adopt a better gender lens?
I look at it like at 3 different stages itself. It starts off with like, who are the people who make these decisions on where the money goes? Is this men or women? And most of the time it's men. And even if it's like for a project on women empowerment, it's men deciding that this money goes to women itself. So how do we ensure that it's also women deciding about where the money goes? And secondly, it's about how much money is actually being allocated to gender-specific projects. Because we speak about a lot of, like Fatou mentioned about mitigation, adaptation, loss and damage and stuff. And it's a proven fact that, women have a role to play and a very special one. But are we ensuring that, especially finance being one of the biggest barriers, are we making, to overcome that barrier, are we making a conscious effort to ensure that money goes very specifically to women-related projects, okay? That is where allocation comes in. And then at implementation, there's always like 2 ways to think about it. Are women the ones implementing the projects to empower women? Or are you asking, it's as simple as, having administrative people, right? Taking into consideration, say for example, if I'm investing or, finance is allocated for a project to help with the livelihoods of women in a coastal community. Your administrative assistants are men. And now you have an issue about, how women's livelihood are supported or dealt with. You can't have a man understand, like Nisreen mentioned, about whether or not, how do you help that woman gain an alternative livelihood in the context of climate change. You can't have an implementer who's a man trying to help a woman in that particular case because he wouldn't understand that. So bringing in women for implementation of project also becomes important, and making sure that women are beneficiaries of this project itself. So at all these stages when it comes to money itself, right from top to bottom, you need to have, it's like I mentioned at the beginning, it's not just about bringing a gender lens, it's actually about having women doing these tasks. Bringing in a gender lens is one thing, and that's on paper. You can even ask men to bring in a gender lens. Why not, right? That's one thing. But then we need to actively make a conscious effort to ensure that women are also the people who are bringing in the right kind of gender lens for allocation usage and implementation of climate finance and other related projects.
All right, really interesting. Thank you. Fatou, if I can ask you the same kind of question then. You looked at the why earlier, why we need to empower women, the challenges women face, but can you lay out then how we can do more, Fatou, to help women take control of their own finances, ensure they're decision makers on money within their own families, for example?
Thank you so much. I mean, just taking it up from Hema. First of all, just to share that women have the local knowledge, women have the traditional knowledge, because women have been managing lands, women have been involved in agricultural activities for over years, women have been conservative leaders. So if we're talking about the knowledge aspect of it, women have it all. And it's to just touch on the issue of the finance. I mean, I'm sure a lot of people do not know, but in terms of finance to women and gender-led solutions around the world, just 1% of the climate finance we have is given to women-led organizations around the world. That is a joke in itself. And I think we need to start from there. You can't talk about financing women-led solutions and you're just giving 1% of it. I mean, have you seen the number of women-led organizations or women-led solutions around the world that are making impact? So we need to start from there, and we need to make sure that it is equitably distributed, and we need to make sure there's substantial amount of money given to women and family-led organizations, especially in the global south, that have been supporting climate-related issues, climate-related solutions, and are part of the world. In addition to that, I mean, we have been seeing at least a little bit of an increase in women leadership in climate negotiations, but that is not enough. It has still been, for the past years, the percentage of women leadership in the UNFCCC process haven't passed the 30%. It hasn't moved from the 30% that it has been. So we need to make sure there is obviously an increase in women leadership to ensure that at least we are pushing for more women-led solutions. And as Hema mentioned, we do not only want the solutions that we're having to have a gender lens, we need to make sure it is gender sensitive and it is gender responsive. And what I mean by that, it needs to be mainstream in our national policies and in our international policies. Nisrin briefly talked about the Gender Action Plan, but the Gender Action Plan actually went in detail to talk about the stringent or the key support women needs to ensure that we progress properly as we implement the UNFCCC Paris Agreement goals. Because it talked about the issue of capacity, it talked about advocacy, it talked about women leadership, and it talked about women financing, among others. So when I'm talking about an increase in women representation or women leadership, it needs to be across the board, and we need to make sure that the Gender Action Plan is also embedded in that. We have seen around the world several international legislations and frameworks like the CEDAW, the Maputo Protocol, among others in place. And all these things more or less interlinks with the issue of not only gender equality or gender equality, but also has a link on how it is important for us to ensure there is climate justice in there. And in addition to that, you know, it's really sad that even when we're making our national policies, our NDC formulations, women are one of the least represented in the formulation of our national policies. So if we're talking at the multilateral level and moving down to the national level, we also need to make sure that it is reflected from the international level to the national level, where these changes that we're calling for is implemented. Because yet it is important for us to ensure that at the national level, these things are there, an increase in women representation, increase in climate financing. But I think where it matters the most is at the national level, because this is where all the policies that we're making, when we go through the UNFCCC processes every year, negotiating on key issues, and at the end of the day, we go back to our home countries to make sure that they are implemented. So for us to move forward, we need to make sure that women are included in the formulation of our national policies, that is the NDCs. Just wanted to say that by 2025, we have to submit another MDC, another updated NDC. So this is also one of the key places we need to make sure that women are included there, and they are not only as spectators there, but they are key stakeholders, key actors in the formulation of our NDCs. And also when we're implementing these things, they need to be key stakeholders. And thirdly, I think we need to make sure that we have going forward as one of the key or concrete actions is to include in our national school curriculums or in our education system topics linking gender equality and climate action. And that way, I think it is going to help us a lot from a young age for not only boys, but women and girls and every single individual to understand why it is important to have a gender sensitive lens in our climate adaptation. And finally, obviously, making sure that...
Go ahead, Fatu.
Yeah, and finally, making sure that women are not only seen, or especially young women from the global south, were not only brought forward to speak when, in conversations, but also brought in forward when key activities, key projects, and key actions are being made in relation to climate action and in relation to gender equality as well. Because I think these things are also very important, because for us at the national level or at our grassroots level, we are leading several climate-related projects that are impacting communities, especially women and girls. So bringing in the experiences that these women have working in the local communities to share best practices could also be very relevant, or could be very important as we move forward in our conversations for climate justice and gender equality, because other people from other parts of the world could also learn from the lessons and the achievements that have been done at our own part of the world. So these are some of the key things. And increased representation of women in not only the UNFCCC policy processes, but also at our national level, where we make our decisions, where we formulate policies. The second thing is we need to make sure we increase global financing for women and feminist-led organizations to ensure that we continue to do the work that we're doing, supporting women and other marginalized groups. We need to ensure that there is also an increased capacity building avenues to ensure that there is more climate education, especially its link and its connection to gender equality, and obviously making sure that we foster more avenues, more environment to continue to share best practices so that we can continue to have more conversations on the nexus of gender and climate.
All right, Fatu, thank you very much. Hemavati, you wanted to come in briefly?
Yes, just one point, just building on Fatu's mention of NDCs itself. It's just also about at the national levels. Many people don't speak about it, but it's also equally about ensuring having gender-biased legislations, which means we are not speaking about, there must be a bias. It's like in a very positive way that, it's like women have been left out of the conversations, which means if you're speaking about, even if it comes down to like a court of law that is deciding on women's issues, there are no women judges there. So how do you expect a right kind of a decision being given? So ensuring that the legislations that are drafted need to have a bias in favor of women to ensure that the right kind of action is being taken when it comes to climate change.
Nisreen, you were nodding. You agree?
We have a very diplomatic terminology for that. We say affirmative action. Yes, it's a must until things are... and this reminds me of the difference between equality, equity, and justice. Equality at this stage is not enough because one part needs more support. So if you have two people, one is very hungry, three people actually. One is very, very hungry, and one is hungry, and one is okay. You cannot give everyone one apple and say this is justice. It's not, because the first person is very hungry and the last person is not hungry at all. So why not giving 2 apples to the person who's very hungry and no apple for the person who's satisfied? And this very much simply explains the situation we are right now. We need to give 2 apples to the women. When we reach an equal point and an equal position between both, then we say equality. But right now, gender equality is not right. It should be gender equity or gender justice, actually.
Good metaphor. Thank you for that. Hemavati, you are on the Loss and Damage Youth Grant Making Council, so I thought maybe we could talk about a kind of a tangible thing there. This is money that was set up, as I understand it, from COP. And when we're talking about making this jump towards implementation, I wonder, is that council a sort of good example of that idea working well in practice, of women being decision makers and beneficiaries? Do we need more bodies like that? Can we apply it to other schemes in the future? Tell us your experience.
Yeah, so just for some context, I think at COP26, the Scottish government allocated about $1 million for loss and damage. This was even before the loss and damage fund was established 2 years ago. And an organization called Climate Justice Resilient Fund got about $200,000. And council was created, and this was exclusively for youth-led projects on loss and damage itself. And what CJRF did was create a council of youth to be the decision makers of where this money actually goes. It's for the simple reason that only young people understand what youth-led really means and what are the difficulties faced by youth. So when it came to us in terms of implementation, or how do we decide who gets the money and where does the money go, we decided it's going to be only applications from the Global South. We're going to have 10 small grants for $10,000 each and one large grant for $50,000. But when it came to evaluation of application itself, for us as a, looking towards, and we call this the participatory grant-making process, which means you engage with people who are in a similar position as the beneficiary so that they truly understand. For us, we were really considerate about the fact that a lot of youth organizations might not have a registered NGO to be able to receive funds from a foreign entity, which means we took that into consideration and opened up the application for keeping that in mind to ensure that nobody is denied an opportunity to receive funds to work on loss and damage merely because of a technicality of a registration of an NGO, right? So similarly, it's about if you're, like I mentioned, when it comes to climate financing, it must be women who are deciding about what kind of projects, money for gender-related activities go to. You can't have others. That is also participatory in nature, getting women to participate in the decision-making process itself. And, I'd give an example. Apart from the council itself, when we speak about finance and where the money goes, women being, private sector is an important, has an important role to play. And a lot of companies invest in this, even for their CSR activities and stuff. So in these cases, it's usually the board of directors that actually, make these decisions on where the money goes and stuff. So when it comes to board of directors, how many women are actually on the boards of companies? You rarely see them, right? So how do you, so it's either it's taking, like, I'll probably use that word from now on, affirmative action, even for private sector to do so. And there has been research that actually shows that, if you have women on board, climate action by companies is so much better than just having men on board. It's simple because they bring in that perspective. And I think we should replicate it, and having more participatory grant-making process, especially when it comes to climate finance. Women must be the decision makers at all costs.
All right, thank you. We're very, very nearly out of time, unfortunately, but I just want to ask all three of you one question, one word answer, one idea, if you can. What's the one best practice, one recommendation that you have based on your experience that you want to see UNESCO take forward to better integrate these two issues of climate change and gender? Fatou, you first, please. One word or one idea.
Climate finance.
Excellent. Nisreen?
Money talks, huh? I think one of the very important things that helped me myself to be where I am right now was mentorship. Mm-hmm. And I think if UNESCO could create women mentorship-led projects for other women, it will be very important. We will close the generational gap. We will make sure that there is a knowledge flow, and will of course empower a lot of young women and ladies around the world. I'm ready to be part of the project as a mentor.
All right, we may well talk about that in our next panel. Thank you. Hemavathi, final word from you, please.
Maybe I'd still go for creating a body, a participatory grant-making body. wherever UNESCO gets money from, make sure that it goes back to women, women in vulnerable communities, and women being the decision makers and the beneficiaries and the implementers.
Wonderful. Food for thought. Thanks very much to all three of you, Nesreen El-Sem, Hemavati Shekhar, and Fatou Dieng. It's been a pleasure to hear from all three of you. Thank you. Just one moment. There we are. Thank you. All right. Now, as I mentioned at the start, UNESCO wants your involvement as well, the involvement of the audience, as we think about these issues of how we can better integrate gender issues into the multilateral framework to help address the climate crisis. And I hope that panel, our speakers, have inspired you, because it's time now. It's time for the question. You should see imminently on the screen a QR code. Use your phones when you see it to scan the code, and then you should be able to answer that question. It's not dissimilar to what I just asked the three women on that last panel. What's the one issue you most want to see UNESCO now promote at the multilateral level in order to improve the lives of women who are living on the front lines of climate change? So have a think. You have a little bit of time. If you're inspired already, go ahead. You can write it in English, you can write it in French, you can write it in Spanish. Please, though, no essays. I have to read them out afterwards, so keep it concise, 1 or 2 words. We'll display them later on up here in a word cloud. We'll discuss it a bit as well. So yeah, take a picture of it, scan it. Now, another thing that I mentioned earlier is those teenagers, the school children from the Collège Garcia Lorca in Seine-Saint-Denis in the Paris region. They're working today on the climate fresco elsewhere in the UNESCO building. Let's see if we can have a quick look at how they're doing. Hopefully we can get a quick visual to see how they're getting on. In something like 45 minutes time, 4 of them will join me here on the stage to tell us about their fears, about their workshop, what they're working on, and some recommendations as well. Well, we don't have the image, but oh, there they are, diligently working away. All right, well, they'll be with us shortly to tell us what's important for them. Now let's move on to our second panel, if we can. As we just heard in our first panel, the solutions to the climate crisis are multilateral, they're global, but they also need to be local. They need to be context-specific, and they need to be bottom-up. So I hope in this panel we'll look at some best practices in different regions and different sectors. All the panelists you're about to hear from in different ways work on issues of water, of biodiversity, of marine ecology, and they're all interested in how that interacts with that question of gender. So let me please welcome to the stage Warsha Singh, Daniel Coto-Dagon, and Yolanda Sanchez. Welcome to all three of you. Okay, well, Daniel, you come to the stage. We are down not 1, but 2 panelists. Daniel Coto, come to the stage. You and I will make this work. I hope I haven't skipped ahead. No, this is where we should be. Allez-y. Juste là, allez-y. Ah, they went to the bathroom. All right, well, allez-y. I'm pleased that you're here. They'll be joining us shortly. Look, while we wait for them, Daniel Coto, why don't you just tell us who you are and the kind of work that you're doing in Benin, et en français, si vous voulez.
OK. Bonjour à tous.
In French, if you like. Well, thank you very much. I'm Danielle Coto-Dagon. I'm president of the Youth Parliament of Water in Benin, and I'm delighted to be with you today. Now, concerning the question about what sort of action, I think that our network the work that we do since 2015 in Benin has been supporting state players and civil society with concrete action to answer issues on water, sanitation and climate change. And I can say, in order to respond to the real needs and concerns, first we need strategic policy documents that take these needs into consideration. If you look at the Youth Parliament for Water in Benin, we work to support state players in drafting such documents, in taking into consideration the real needs of vulnerable people such as women and indigenous communities, so that these strategic documents answer those needs. And also we look to the national ownership of these documents and international work as well. And I'd like to give you a few examples. The Action Plan on Gender and Climate Change. Benin is one of the countries that has such a strategic document. It includes 3 major components and also action sector by sector to respond to the needs of women and girls in Benin. We also have the National Action Plan for Integrated Water Management, and that concentrates on sustainable management of water in Benin. The third period to 2025 is now underway, and the document focuses on the involvement of women and girls in the management of water resources. And the third element I wanted to mention is also the public code on hygiene. You know that women are the greatest users of water, first of all for menstrual hygiene reasons, but also for providing drinking water, especially to rural communities. So we have national legislation, and it's particularly important for us because we have brought it up to date in 2022 following advocacy of our organization to ensure that the document can take into consideration the real challenges for women and girls in hygiene and sanitation at national level, so that the document does respond to their actual needs. And this document, since 2022, is now in force in Benin, and this was possible thanks to the advocacy of my organization. And we always say water is life. But sanitation and hygiene, life insurance. And that is the type of document that supports women and girls in responding to their needs in terms of access to water, sanitation, hygiene and climate change.
Daniel Cotto, thank you very much. Yolanda Sanchez, Washa Singh, a little belatedly, but welcome to the stage. Pleased that you're with us. I'll just very quickly introduce both of you before I ask our first question. Yolanda Sanchez, down the end, she's the co-founder of the Latin American Marine Educators Network. She specializes in advocating for ocean conservation through literacy, leadership, networking, and community engagement. And in the middle there, we have Washa Singh. She's a marine ecologist at the Marine and Freshwater Research Institute in Iceland. As part of her research, she looks at the intersection between climate change and social dimensions. One of those dimensions is gender. So that's a very quick summation of what the two of you do. Daniel, thank you very much for telling us as well about the work that you're doing in Benin. Maybe I can come to you first, Washa, because lots of your work is in Iceland. We'll talk about Iceland in a minute, but first I want to ask you about Fiji. You're from Fiji, Pacific Island nation. Just very quickly sort of set the scene for us as to the particular challenges that women face there with the climate emergency.
Yeah, so good morning, everyone. Sorry for being a bit late.
We forgive you.
So in Fiji, okay, let's first talk about Pacific Island countries. It's a region that is most exposed to climate change at the moment. And a lot of the population in Fiji, they are situated along the coasts. And as we know, rising sea level is a big threat. And these coastal communities, they rely a lot on subsistence fisheries and subsistence farming. And women play a vital role in this because they bear the domestic responsibilities. They are responsible for putting food on the table on a day-to-day basis because they go out and fish and along the reefs. And they also do farming, so harvest the vegetables. And then, they're stuck in this social norm of, taking care of children. So when there is climate crisis, this component of the population is disproportionately affected, as we've already been talking about, because they lack the specialized education and skills to be able to support themselves and to find alternate sources of income or food security, for one. And then we've been talking about water scarcity. Like Nazreen was pointing out, in Sudan, women have to travel far to get water, and this can also put a lot of impact on their health, for instance, especially pregnant women and mothers. And also I want to point out that these inequalities will differ by, the economic situation. So it's also economic inequalities. So this is where the equity aspect comes in. If you go in the rural areas, then it's a poor community. There is patriarchy in the community. There's a chief who decides, how things should work. Whereas if you go into the urban areas, then it's more individual family units, and they are able to support themselves better. An individual family decides what the role of the woman is. But sorry, I know you told me not to talk for too long.
No, we're with you. We're with you.
But this will, affect. So the way there is no one-size-fits-all situation here.
Absolutely.
It depends on, the problem you're tackling.
Yeah, there is no one-size-fits-all, and that's why we've sort of invited three of you from very different regions who work in different sectors, but as I say, sort of all playing with that idea of water and how women on the front lines deal with it. Yolanda, I want to ask you about Chile. You're not Chilean, but you work a lot in Chile. Economically, and also from a climate perspective, it's very different to Fiji. But just kind of give us, again, a very quick overview, the particular challenges that you would say women face there.
Buenos días.
Well, good morning. Now, I would like to make use of this wonderful opportunity provided by simultaneous interpretation to be able to speak in Spanish. So I do try to defend the use of multilingualism, but I am frequently put in a position where I had to speak English. However, I think that it is good to be able to make use of the opportunity to speak our own language, because that does feel more comfortable. So thank you very much indeed. So I'm actually Spanish, but I have lived in Chile for about 8 years, and I work with people who are very involved in marine conservation. I've known a lot of very powerful women who push to the creation of protected marine areas, and my understanding of needs is in the realm of support. People who are there in the field and who push forward in decision-making processes, and these women are empowered already. They either have the knowledge or they have the ideas because they're local, because they're looking after the environment, as many people have said. And there's this maternity drive to look after, to care for other people and everything around us. And I think that this really helps us to work in conservation. I think that the only thing that we need is to be given the role and the support to push our ideas forward. And in Chile, which is no longer a developing country, even though there is still a social gap that is quite wide, depending on how you calculate matters, a lot of people in the community look to conservation and how they can benefit from these actions. And I think that the participation of women has been very pioneering, very active. And Chile is proud to have more role model women. We have Michelle, and she's always supported conservation and the environment, and she's given such a voice to women throughout the territory to become more visible, to feel safer, to push for these needs.
Thank you, Yolanda. Daniel Koto, I'd like to bring you back in now, if I can. You gave us a really good overview at the top of the work that you're doing with Green Amazonas in Benin, and how that has meant that women are increasingly involved in climate action. So my question to you is, how has having women there at the table, making decisions as a result of your work, how has that provided insights or changes that weren't there before? Can you perhaps give us a few concrete examples?
Oui, bien sûr, je peux le faire.
Yes, of course. Now, the simple answer is that the people who are close to the problems tend to be close to the solutions. If you look at the discussion between a patient and a doctor, you're feeling unwell, you go to see the doctor. You talk about your symptoms and how you feel. And with the doctor's expertise and knowledge, then the doctor can provide the prescription that will help you with your health. And it's the same approach that we should adopt regarding the role of women in climate change. They need to be close in discussions, in decision-making processes, so that we better understand what are the deep issues and problems that have led to current situations, to understand their real needs and position. If you look at the Green Amazons program, which I've been coordinating throughout 2022, this program has been working on involving women and girls in Benin in the fight against climate change. And the first thing we did was to try to carry out a survey to ask women and girls involved in the fight against climate change why they had become involved, what were the needs that they had that they thought were a priority to become more involved and more active to fight climate change. And finally, to also look to support to state bodies and non-state organizations that can support women and girls in becoming involved in the fight against climate change. And it is on the basis of the survey that we identified key actions and a framework with concrete actions to support women and girls in facing these issues. So we need to first understand how they feel, what is their way of life, their activities, and how it is impacted by climate change, and what are the real needs that they have on these issues. And then we can develop actions taking into consideration the needs that we've identified.
Thank you. Washa, I want to bring in Iceland now as a completely different kind of case study, because Iceland's a really interesting country, I think, when we're having this conversation, because it is clearly at risk from climate change. We're already seeing that. It's also a country, though, which is actively thinking about and trying to improve gender equity. So what kind of work is being done now to integrate those gender issues into the climate change fight? And is that so far being translated into any concrete action?
Yeah, so I'm happy to be representing, the Global South and the Global North today. And so Iceland is one of the top nations. It is the leading nation in the World Economic Forum Gender Gap Index. And it's the only country that was able to close the gender gap more than 90% in 2023. And I guess one of the things that contributes to this is because there is a specific Gender Equality Act. But not only that, there is a Directorate of Equality that is overseeing the enforcement of this act. And they provide guidance, they do public outreach, and they get specific funding from the government to do this. And so it focuses on, all the issues that we've been talking about, advancing women leadership, closing in the gender pay gap, also providing vulnerable women with social services, and looking at gender-based violence. And climate change is sort of incorporated into the act. And the changes that happen related to climate change are considered. And Yeah, but overall, that's the picture.
Okay, so that's the picture, and there are a couple of tangible ideas that maybe we can tease out a bit there, Yolanda, when we're thinking about how we can better amplify the position of women working in science or women who are indeed on the climate change front lines, because we know, UNESCO documentation will tell us that women only account for something like 33% of science researchers around the world. So maybe there's a glass ceiling in the sector. If there is, how do we smash it? Because maybe you can throw out a couple of ideas for us. Washa gave a couple of tangible ones that they're playing with in Iceland. I don't know if you have any more grants, more funding for women scientists, more educational opportunities. What are the big ones that you think we need to hear about?
Okay, so, totalmente.
Well, I completely agree with what Washa has said. I think that, and also Danielle, I think they've covered most of these issues. Now, in my case, I think that we can identify a certain number of steps to try to overcome these gaps. And one of the issues is funding. How the funding that is available for marine conservation and education activities include this equity, and how we will move away from the theory of what we should do, but to have concrete examples. How do you include gender equality? How do you intend to work? How are you mainstreaming? So now that I'm working on obtaining funding from the British government for the ocean programme, one of the requests for tabling the demand is to demonstrate how the gender gap will be overcome, how gender equality will be ensured within the project. And one of the important aspects, on the basis of my many years' experience in education, is how do we go beyond the basics? I mean, education isn't just about children, for instance, it's about adults as well. So I think that from the very beginning we need to be inclusive in gender, especially in language. In Spanish, there's a difference between the masculine and feminine forms. Historically, the masculine form has been used to cover everybody, but now we're working on the language diversity to make it more inclusive, to see how we can use these tools. And frequently, I'm told, well, you don't need to say scientists in the masculine and the feminine. But if you only use the masculine, if you're talking to a group of people and you're only using the masculine form, only the men and the boys feel concerned. So we have to try to start that way to solve this type of gap.
Okay, so language matters, absolutely. Education is essential. Daniel Koto, when we're thinking about that question of how we can amplify the position of women, the role of women here, I don't know what you think of what we just heard, those ideas, education and language, but also perhaps capacity building. Maybe just spell out for anybody who doesn't know sort of what that is and what you think of that as part of this conversation.
Oui, je pense déjà que...
Well, I completely agree with what we've heard a moment ago. I think that Benin has shown a lot of concrete actions in involving women in decision-making processes, and out of the 15 women who were at COP28, one was representing Benin. So these issues of education on gender are a solution, but one thing that I would really like to insist on is also the institutional and legal framework that should be favourable to the real involvement of women and girls in decision-making processes. So yes, education matters to consolidate the foundation, but if you don't have a legal framework that is also favorable, you can't move forward. To give the example of my country, which of course I take as a model here, in Benin, we have a structure that is attached to the presidency that is in charge of women and to fight against all discrimination against women and girls, and not only in climate change, but in all sectors. And I mentioned the action plan on climate change that Benin has already drafted and which is now being implemented. This action plan on climate change has 3 components, as I said. The first is awareness raising and information, and that has to do, of course, with education. The second is capacity building, both for state and non-state players. And this also has a chapter on the involvement of women. And finally, the last is to empower women, both in rural and urban areas. And I think that this is an approach we should encourage. The country now has a document in the framework of climate change, but we also need to take into consideration the real needs and the real challenges locally. And finally, let me also add, if you look at the strategic document and the way it was drafted, it's the focal points in the ministries and sectors relating to climate change that contributed to the drafting of the strategic document. So we didn't just sit down and draft a document on the basis of the government's priorities. Each ministry has a focal point on climate change, and they work on taking into consideration the real needs of women and girls in terms of tourism, agriculture, water, coastal areas. All of these are vulnerable sectors in terms of climate change, and it's these focal points that drafted and provided inputs for the strategic document on climate change. So this is also a good example, I think, that we could recommend as an action.
Thank you. And I think it's clear from listening to all of you that solutions need to be local, they need to be context specific, they need to be relevant to the particular country that we're talking about. But this is the International Day of Women in Multilateralism, and they also have to be global, they also have to be multilateral. And Washa, I want to bring you in on that because you are working with the International Council for the Exploration of the Sea. Now, it's a body that does have a gender equality plan. Tell us maybe maybe what's in the plan, but is it making a difference? Would you like to see more bodies doing what they're doing?
So just to put this in a little bit of context for the audience, the International Council for the Exploration of the Sea is an intergovernmental body in the North Atlantic and Arctic. So, and they have 20 participating countries. And these are countries in the north that are doing the marine science and sustainable fisheries work. So these are a group of scientists, a group of experts in various fields coming together. And in 2022, the ICs, I'm going to call it ICs from now onwards, they made a gender equality plan, like Nadia is saying. And so the key words in this gender equality plan are diversity, equity, and inclusion. And but it's very new, and they have specific targets to collect gender disaggregated data, which is really important to understand, where the problem lies, and make, evidence-based decisions. And so it's hard to say at the moment whether it's working or not, but they are definitely making an effort to have this included in every working group that ICES has. And there is a special session on it in the annual science conference from now onwards that will specifically talk about gender equality in marine science.
Thank you. And Yolanda, I don't know if you want to pick up on any of that, because again, something that Washa touched on earlier is she's a representative of the developed world and the developing world. And there are clearly connections in the sense that all of us will face the climate emergency, whatever part of the world that we live in. And so partnerships are important, And networking is important as well. You work hugely in the field of networking, of bringing women together. So your thoughts perhaps on that idea based on what Washa just said.
Well, yes, quite. To me, I think the development of a professional career as a woman or as a young person and trying to move forward perhaps with more innovative ideas, there's always a moment where you feel a little bit lonely. So you need a network, you need friends to share your ideas with at work, and you need to increase that network of mentorship, but also support people who work with you, who help you to analyze matters. And I think that this becomes highly important, not only for your personal development as a professional, but also in terms of empowerment and how the group gives greater visibility to the positioning of a professional. So I think it's very important what we share. At the end of the day, there's a number of things that we want to do to move towards our aim, and the work in a network gives a more open view of a certain number of things, of existing differences. And I was extremely lucky to work in Chile in a number of different locations and amplify my knowledge, and then to be able to go back to Spain and to work with institutions based in Africa. And again, it's another part of the world. You get a different vision of things. And so you have a vision that is the same in many ways and different in other ways. And trying to connect people who are searching for solutions for the same problems by sharing ideas, that's a very powerful thing. I think it gives you a possibility of understanding other positions. And when you reach the stage of participating in decision-making processes, you're better informed, thanks to all those conversations.
Thank you. Daniel Koto, I don't know if you want to pick up on any of that, on like the connections and the networking that can be drawn between women in the global north and the global south as we face climate change, and particularly perhaps how those of us here in the global north can learn from countries in the global south.
Oui, je pense que
I think that sharing information on good practices and specific practices implemented between countries of the global north and global south can be part of the solution, but it depends on the context of the solutions. We can learn from what's done in countries of the global north in terms of actions, initiatives, even in terms of strategy. But then at a local level, the needs of the real situation need to be taken into account to be able to implement these. We can't just take the solutions as they are and implement them directly. But it's a case of adapting them to the specific context of our countries. And as the other panelist said, countries in the global north and the global south can act as levers to accelerate the fight against discrimination against women and climate change. When we look at just one country that's making an effort, it's not the same as if 15 or 20 or 30 countries were acting together, pooling their efforts to address the same issue. And it has a sort of domino effect. And so to do this, countries of the global north and the global south need to find the means to put in place specific actions at all levels of society, both nationally and internationally. And they must not be isolated. We must act together to address these issues.
And Washa, something that I'm wondering as we're listening to this is, how much do we actually know about the scale of the problem? I mean, I gave us a few percentages earlier, that question of, is there a glass ceiling for women in climate sciences? But do we need more data? Do we need more qualitative analysis? Do we actually know how bad this is?
So earlier I was talking about the overall picture in Iceland. Yeah. But if we zoom into the marine sector, then there is a wider gender gap there. So, so there are more women graduating with degrees that would enable them to get jobs in the marine science sector. But if you look at the proportion of people employed, then it's more males. So I can give some numbers from the Marine and Freshwater Research Institute, where I work. There's 63% men and 37% women employed at the institute. Right, and then of course it's a marine research institute, so we have 2 research vessels that go out to sea to do the monitoring of the fisheries resources. So we have crew members who are also staff members of the institute, and if we take away that portion of the staff employed by the institute, then this gap narrows. Then it's 55% women and 55% men and 45% women. So it becomes clear that women are more in desk job, like doing research, doing science, and not so much in jobs where you need to go out to sea. Because if you have more responsibilities of taking care of the family, then it's hard to be out at sea for a long time. Like the fisheries in Iceland is very industrialized. There are big trawlers that stay out at sea for months. So it's hard for women to go out at sea, as it stands, because of the conventional, social roles that we have. And so there is definitely more need to collect all these gender disaggregated data. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Yolanda, I don't know if you want to pick up on any of that in terms of, I asked you already about smashing the glass ceiling, but how practically we can get women into these positions of responsibility where they can affect real change for their future. I know education's a big one for you. We've touched on networking already, but I don't know if you want to build on any of that.
Creo que
I think that when you ask the question about whether we need more data, as I see it, almost all decisions are often based on this data, and that's very important. And I believe very strongly in science and communication, the need for this. But this data is based on experiments. It's not based on publications. And so we need to actually take into account the experiences of women when they're taking decisions, when they're participating in conservation, when they're going out to sea, etc. And all of these experiences are those which enable us to have a more general view of how we can take a position on women's leadership in decision-making. We might be repeating some ideas, perhaps, but these are really important ideas, such as support, mentoring. Each person here is probably here because we've had people to support us on the way. And I know that I've been supported by many, many people who are perhaps even listening to us, people who have provided support, which helps you to take steps towards being able to express your opinion and make decisions. And your opinion might not necessarily take the form of an article. It might be based on your experience, or it might be something that you've seen in other women. It might be something you've experienced in Patagonia or Chile, or in a space where there are people who have never actually been, women who have never been on a boat because perhaps they're scared of the sea, etc. So how can we connect all of these ideas and use this information to help these visions be present in decision-making? It's very difficult, and this reflects on everything that Daniel said too, on the importance of networks and how to position this information via networks and to give it power and help this to reach different places.
Thank you. And Daniel Koto, I don't know if you want to pick up on any of that in the specific context of Benin, because something I've been thinking about is how our jobs, all of our jobs, will shift into as the green economy develops, as climate change becomes a bigger problem. And I wonder how you think women's jobs perhaps are shifting or will shift more, and if you want to pick up on anything that's just been said.
Oui, bien sûr. Je pense que pour faire la transition.
Well, I think that with regard to the transition to the green economy and women, we need to co-create solutions along with them. And some examples of these are within a consultation that I took part in for a project for funding for a village in Benin, the problem linked to these villages was the degeneration of the mangroves, because the mangrove forests are used by women to make smoked fish and other activities, which is then made available to the population. These women were using these mangrove forests and they were contributing to the conservation of these areas. And when we look at the value of the mangroves, we can see how high this is. It's all about preserving biodiversity, and it's a problem that needs to be addressed. So we tried to reach out to these women to talk about why they were using these forests, what are the economic limitations that they came up against when using this way of producing smoked fish. And what we understood was that they didn't know there were any other options outside of these mangrove forests to do, particularly with biogas, because in fact these mangrove forests were being damaged in the production of this smoked fish. And so that has to do with approaches, it has to do with education as well, as said. We have to show people that there's another way and develop their purchasing power, contribute to the development of the economy whilst preserving the natural resources which underpin the green economy. So with regard to these women, we inform them of other ways of producing smoked fish by using solar energy in order to produce this smoked fish. And to convince them to use other approaches, we drew up a comparison of the financial situation if they were continued using the mangrove forests, or rather the wood from the mangrove forest, and if they started using green economy solutions. And this enabled us to demonstrate that the profits made would be much higher if they were to use solar energy. So based on this, they were convinced and they adopted this idea. They started producing smoked fish, making solar energy instead of using wood from the mangrove forests. And so based on this, we now want to work with these women to restore the damaged area in the mangrove forest by planting new species within this project. And these women are now contributing to roll out green energy at local level. And also, they're restoring the mangroves which were degraded, and that all helps the environment. So I think that to bring about this transition with regard to all of the different activities and preserve the green economy, we need to co-create along with women and really try to show the advantages that they can draw in terms of profits in economic terms, and also the advantages in terms of ecosystem services to do with the affected areas, so that these women can really face up to the green economic transition.
Washa, go ahead.
So in Fiji, we have similar kind of situation where women are depending quite a lot on the mangrove areas for fisheries. And because of coastal erosion, these areas are quickly disappearing. So it is, this sort of initiative is also ongoing there, where they are, replanting mangrove patches, and women are actively involved. But what are men doing in the meantime? When the women have to go into the mangrove patches, they are out on motorized boats going further out, in deeper waters, outside the reef area. So in terms of, where can women shift their skills and get new jobs? If they have more diverse education and more technical skills, then they should also be able to go out to sea and, get alternative source of food. And then they won't necessarily be stuck in the inshore area only.
Thank you. Thank you. Two really tangible examples there. That's excellent. Thanks very much. I'm going to ask all three of you a final question in just a moment. Perhaps a slightly provocative one, but before we do, I want to give the floor quickly to Yolanda to talk about ocean literacy quickly, because I know that later on with Raquel Martin, we're going to talk about women's connection with the ocean economically and how it's different. I wonder if you want to speak to that just briefly.
Sí, muchas gracias.
Yes, thank you very much. This is one of my favourite topics, Ocean literacy is something that's been worked on for many years. It's something that stems from the need to inform people so that they can make responsible decisions about the sea. And there are a lot of working groups, particularly from the Northern Hemisphere, from the US, from Europe, and we've been working on this issue at subglobal level to try to understand the term better, because it's a term which is very full of content. Ocean literacy has to do with a number of principles and a host of information, and we think that this information is something that everybody needs to know. Ocean literacy is not necessarily an issue of knowledge, of theoretical knowledge. It has to do with a connection with emotion, with activism, and with care. And so we've started to develop ocean literacy, moving in all of these other directions. For me, the most important thing when we talk about ocean literacy is that we really need to understand, when we're trying to make progress on this issue, what does each person need, each person that we're working with? What does each community need? And we need to try to promote this ocean literacy, perhaps in a community that lives off the sea or that lives near the beach, but has never actually gone out to sea because they're scared. I know there are many women in this situation, and I was very lucky to be able to promote this, or rather to help women overcome this, to say to them, let's go and have a look at the sea. And that's something that I'd never experienced before in my life, and I find it quite incredible. Because people then realise that they can go to the beach whenever they want, and it can awaken a new connection in people to the sea. So there are people that already have this connection and they want to obtain more information. That can be the case too. For me, it's a bidirectional conversion. We need to listen to what people know about the sea, what they like about it, what they're scared of, and then based on this, that's the starting point, we start building our story, moving towards ocean literacy. And we might need to use some innovative tools. When we talk about education, we know that this is changing and we need to change it, we need to promote this. And to do this, we need to be aware of educational methodology that we can use when we talk about ocean education or ocean literacy. We want to awaken a sort of curiosity about the sea. We want to open debate, not necessarily just on the scientific knowledge that we have. We want to awaken critical thinking, curiosity, and we want to really cause people to ask questions. Because at the end of the day, ocean literacy has to do with people who are connected to the sea in some way already, because they have this curiosity. The sea is no longer a source of fear for them. And I think it's important to see what this connection is and see from what starting point people can forge this connection to the sea. Everything we talked about previously, the network for ocean literacy, has to do with more than 1,000 people who have signed up to this network. We share our ideas, we share our best practices, and we also share cases that were not a success so that we can learn from these and make progress together. Currently, we're very lucky because via the Ocean Decade, ocean literacy has become very widespread, and we can see it at international level, and it's one of the key things that help us to move towards conservation of the ocean. And so I think that whenever a decision is taken on ocean conservation, somebody who has information on this education needs to be involved in it, in these conservation decisions.
Thank you very much. Washa, you want to say something quickly? Go ahead.
Yeah. So tied with this ocean literacy is, the concept that we use a lot in marine science. It's called social ecological models or social ecological systems. We are not only looking at, conserving the ecology and the ecosystem, but, the interaction of the humans with the ecosystem.
Thank you. Just a final question to all three of you. I asked our first panel to come up with one word or one idea. I'm going to ask you the same, but I want to know from all three of you, I'm going to start with you for obvious reasons, Daniel Koto, the role of men in this conversation. You're the only man on the panels today. What is the role of men when we're thinking about climate and gender and its intersection?
Merci beaucoup. Je pense que le...
Thank you very much. I think that men's role is to support women and girls who are carrying out these specific actions to move forward on the question, to be there to co-create along with them. And I'd also like to highlight something. Sometimes I feel that when I listen to some activists working in education, etc., that men are sort of put to the side and it's all about women. But it shouldn't be like that. Because it was actually the excessive presence of men in decision-making that has led to the current state of affairs. And as said earlier, we need to talk about equality, or rather equity rather than equality on these issues, and allow men, women and girls to work all together.
If you can.
So I think earlier I said, there is, not one model that fits all.
Yeah.
But of course, it's also important to harmonize. And capacity building is a great way of sharing experiences, not just within region, but between regions. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Did you want to add something?
Yeah, I just wanted to highlight the work of the Growth Center in Iceland. It's part of the International Development Corporation of Iceland, and it focuses on capacity building in developing countries.
Okay. Thank you. Yolanda Sanchez, I'll give you the final word then on that question of the role of men in this.
Qué responsabilidad.
What a responsibility. I'd like to support what Daniel said, and I'd like to support him because he was brave enough to come here today. And you're sort of in a bit of an exposed position when you say that there's some sort of rejection. Perhaps there shouldn't be this. But I also feel this, that some people think that Daniel shouldn't be here talking about women's role in all of these things, for example. And I feel, as a Spanish person who works in Latin America, in Chile, for example, I sometimes feel the same sort of situation. And I want to create these networks in Latin America, but I don't want to be the figurehead, as it were, because that's not incumbent upon me. And we need to be very respectful and very humble and be aware that this is not actually us. We're supporting this, we're driving this forward, but it's not. We are not the figureheads of it. And if Daniel were not here today talking about all of this, then we wouldn't have learned certain things that have been raised today. And we wouldn't have connected this with this experience that he's sharing with us. And the same happens to me, because if I was not involved with promoting this network, then I wouldn't be aware of everything that's happening in Latin America. If I could say a couple of things just to conclude, I'd like to say that we have talked about education, the importance of working on resilience and to support women, and all of this educational process in which we all need to participate. How can we bring this role of powerful women into our communities, and how can we collaborate with men to show everyone that it's not a threat, it's more a case of accompanying each other, and this invisible emotional role that falls on women, everything that we're responsible for, that girls used to be responsible for too as well. How can we make progress on all of this? And how can we tell people this is what you need to do, but not have it seem like a threat? And I think that communities can help us a lot in this, but we also need to educate adult men on this need, and to take away the fear, take away the threat of a powerful woman.
Okay, Washa, go ahead. I lost the whole.
Yeah, so just to point out, I think one of the reasons why this gender equality in Iceland is really working is because men equally participate.
All right.
And like it was pointed out in the keynote, we need to be a team.
Thank you very much to all three of you. Yolanda Sanchez, Washa Singh, and Daniel Koto Dagon. It's been a pleasure to hear from all three of you. Thank you. Now, as I mentioned earlier, we're going to hear from young people, from those who will inherit our planet. The time has come to hear from the students from the Collège Garcia Lorca. They've been working this morning on their climate fresco, as I said at the beginning. And I'm very pleased that 4 of them are coming onto the stage now, 4 representatives of that class, with the coordinator of that program here, Juliana Devis Cantillo, to tell us a bit more about the work that they've been doing. Bienvenue.
Bonjour.
Hello.
Je m'appelle Juliana.
My name's Juliana, and I'm going to speak on behalf of the Climate Fresco, which is an association that works on climate issues and is trying to work towards the transition that we need. The Climate Fresco is an educational activity which is addressed to adults and children. Today we have spent 2 hours with students from the Garcia Lorca school in Saint-Saint-Denis, and we have done this via workshops based on cards and on artificial intelligence, which helps us understand the causes of climate change. It helps us take another view on this very broad subject, these very broad subjects such as gender equality, the role of young people in all of this, and also bilateral issues on this issue, which doesn't only concern France, but also all countries around the world. There are 4 students next to me who are better placed to talk about this, and they are going to talk to you. They might not feel fully comfortable, but it's all going to be fine. Everyone's very happy to hear from you. I'm going to ask them a few questions so they can tell you what we've been doing today during the 2 hours of the workshop that we had. So, tell us about it. Yamin, when you think about the climate, what do you think about?
Wesh. Je pense.
I think about greenhouse gases. When I think about the climate, I think about greenhouse gases, families, everything that humans do. Cars, for example, it has consequences. It emits CO2.
Merci beaucoup. Et toi?
Thank you very much. And you, Irshad? I have a question which is not necessarily linked to the climate this time. Can you tell me an action or a solution that we have addressed today and that you think could be implemented by all countries around the world together?
Est-ce qu'il y a une action, une solution?
Is there an action or a particular solution that you can think of, and that we talked about earlier, that could be implemented by all countries around the world?
Les produits.
Products that consume CO2, we could do something about them. For example, cars, or rather that emit CO2, or planes.
Utiliser plus les transports en commun.
I think about public transport. That's very good. Let's move to the girls now. Tell me, why do you think that the life of girls and boys is different, or rather the opinion of girls and boys is important to take into account on these issues?
Pas de réponse.
No answer? Okay. Today you're talking to generations who are already working on these subjects. You're the future generation. Do you have any message that you'd like to send to the former generation? I'd like to say, stop polluting, because that's what leads to climate change, and it leads to the heating of the oceans, rising of sea levels, and famine.
Pour moi, ça mène la Terre à sa perte.
For me, I just think about the fact that there are consequences that we won't be able to stop if we don't take action now. Thank you very much. That's all for us. Would you like to add something?
Une prochaine fois. La prochaine.
Perhaps next time. Thank you for being here.
I admire their bravery. I wouldn't have done it. So thank you to them. Thanks for giving us a bit of energy in the middle of this session. We're going to move on now to our last part of the panel discussions under the theme of connecting women with the ocean. Now, as part of the UN Ocean Decade, one of the major elements of UNESCO's global initiative is to work with partners on how to better amplify the voices of women who are in the fields of ocean science. I'll just give you one example. UNESCO is supporting Women from the Sea. It's a documentary that will offer an intimate portrait of women around the world from different backgrounds, different countries, different age groups, who all have that intimate connection with the oceans. Let's see if we can take a minute now to watch a little bit of Women from the Sea. It's coming, I hope.
Para mim, uma mulher do mar é uma pessoa, que neste caso se identifica como mulher, que tenha qualquer tipo de relação com o mar. Não necessariamente uma relação profissional, mas principalmente uma relação emocional.
O que é que me preocupa? Tudo! As preocupações hoje em dia são grandes. O mar está ameaçado de diversas formas e algumas delas já são inegáveis. Temos muitas evidências de que as coisas estão a mudar e não necessariamente para melhor.
Preocupa-me a hipocrisia em relação ao mar.
Preocupa-me também a apatia das pessoas.
Eu gostava tanto que toda a gente tivesse a noção de quão importante é o mar, que ele é o suporte de vida do nosso planeta.
Preocupam-me as alterações climáticas, se os organismos se vão adaptar ou não a estes aumentos de temperatura.
Preocupa-me muito a escassez do peixe. Eu só sobrevivo através das minhas embarcações.
Preocupa-me muita coisa no mar. Quando vejo peixe a morrer a comerem plásticos.
Há muitos plásticos, assim pequeninos.
As algas todas poluídas e o mar todo sujo.
Preocupa-me o mar perder a vida. Preocupa-me o mar morrer. Perder a sua biodiversidade.
O meu maior desejo é poder contemplar o mar até o fim da minha vida.
Can you hear me?
Preocupa-me que existe uma lei do mar que foi supostamente desenhada para criar equidade entre os países, entre os estados costeiros, mas apenas pode aplicar essa lei quem tem tecnologia, quem tem recursos financeiros para fazer.
O meu maior desejo é continuar a andar no mar, correr tudo bem, fazer boas pescas e ter saúde.
Just had a little problem. So you're still connected with the other microphone.
Toda a gente fosse mulheres e homens e crianças do mar.
Eu acho que temos que continuar a trabalhar na comunicação e na educação das pessoas, sejam elas crianças ou adultos, porque todos nós temos um papel fundamental como indivíduos em cuidar do oceano. Por isso, eu acho que com a quantidade de pessoas que hoje estão alerta para todos os problemas que temos, sem dúvida que daqui a 10 anos a próxima geração será muito mais forte e muito mais atenta.
Eu acho que o mar e a mulher são um só podem.
So that was a little of from women from the sea. And let's hear now from the director of the documentary, Raquel Mataz, with me. Please welcome to the stage. Hello. Sit there, grab a microphone. So, tell us a bit about this documentary. We just saw a small clip from it there. It's begun life in Portugal. All those women we heard there are in Portugal, I believe. So tell us about it. What inspired you to produce it?
Well, it's really
hold the microphone a little closer.
It's really an honor to be here today and to show the voices of these women, and that's what inspired us. I didn't start this project by myself. There's two other women that joined me, and inviting all the women that work and share a common love for the ocean, have an emotional relationship with the ocean, to be part of this documentary. We felt it was very important because we are all communicators. I have been a filmmaker for many, many years, and I've listened to the words of people that are communicating about what they care for. And what I see, and I'm sure you have too, is that people sparkle when they are talking about something that really inspires them and they really care for. So I thought that this was a great starting point to get these women to communicate what is their concerns. That's why we selected a few testimonies from them about what worries them. These are a collection of women that we interviewed last October in the Azores Islands. We were very fortunate to get funding from the Azores government to actually interview 46 women, and you can see they're women from all different ages and professional backgrounds. This is not just scientists talking to scientists. This is women that have an emotional connection with the ocean. And we believe they have a very powerful testimony to engage a broader audience. That's our aim, that we are able to really create empathy and look and work for maritime life well-being all together, joined in this effort to save what is crucial to our life and our planet.
Absolutely, and I know UNESCO is supporting Women from the Sea to help you expand the documentary globally now. So tell us, big picture, what's the plan, and what it is that you're hoping perhaps to achieve by having a global collection of voices of women from the sea?
Well, we want to invite everyone that has an emotional connection with the ocean, that cares for the ocean and for life on our planet, to join us. And we were very fortunate that also UNESCO supported us on having now a group on Ocean Decade Network, where everyone can join us. And the idea is that we have now then this giant leap into becoming international, because we finally have had financial support to create a dedicated CRM where all these women and all the information about what they're doing, because most of them, to be honest, are really professionally engaged with taking care of the ocean. They are scientists, but they are also sports persons, and they engage with the ocean every day. But other women are just protecting what they care for on their daily lives, and we can all do that. And so by sharing these ideas on a global vision, I think we can touch more people. And our idea is that we're not only talking through the normal channels where we have the scientists and the educators, and ocean literacy is very important because it's giving this international panorama of how we can take care of the ocean. We believe that by taking care of the ocean, we're taking care of humanity, we're taking care of life on our planet.
And you've done quite a few of those interviews already in Portugal. So I'm interested in, I don't know, perhaps what surprised you most, what struck a chord with you most when you were hearing from the women yourself?
What surprises me, or well, what really touches me is that Women are caregivers, they are caretakers. They care for what they love, and that's their role in humanity. And so they care intensively for the ocean, and they take care of it in their everyday lives. And even from very young age, as you saw there's a 5-year-old saying how concerned she is about the microplastics that she sees in the beach. So I'm always very surprised with they're passionate for it. I think that's what really drives us. And also, what was really interesting is that it's something that women are very good at. It's word of mouth. So we like to tell a friend about something we are concerned with, and also something we are doing to protect and to make it feel better. So there's this contagious movement of women from the sea, from all over the world. And we believe that by collecting all their testimonies, we'll leave a legacy, an heritage for generations to come. We hope the project will move on until at least 2030, and by then, with our awareness campaigns and also with our documentaries, because we're not just making one documentary about the emotional relationship that women have with the ocean, but we're also we're taking the experts that are already joining us and the ones that will join us in the future to actually do a documentary series on 4 very important issues: marine litter, climate change, biodiversity, and blue economy. And that's another legacy we want to leave, because these women are the top experts, but they're also in love with the ocean. So these two together, I think it's a very powerful tool we're living for our generation, for next generations to come, to really look at the ocean and take care of it.
Thank you very much. And in a little bit, we'll hear from, I think, 2 women who really do have that intimate connection with the ocean, Alexia Barriere and Maya Gabera, surfer and a sailor, respectively. Before we let you go, though, Raquel, and we start that final conversation, I thought you would be a good person to help me digest the results of the audience question that I mentioned at the top. As a reminder, that question was, what's the one issue that you most want to see UNESCO promote in order to improve the lives of women who are on the front lines of climate change? Hopefully you all took a picture of the QR code. It's too late now. Let's see if we can bring up the results and have a look at them with Raquel. Here we are.
Oh, I can't read it.
You can't read it. Well, I'll give you... Oh, I like this one. Racial equality, equal races, that's good. Ethical diversity, mentorship, access to education seems to be a big one, leadership, climate safety, financing for women, intersectionalities there as well, if I can see that well. It's a bit bigger on the screen up here. Let's have a look. Sports for women in the Olympic Games, that's a good idea. Perhaps we should talk about that with our next panelists. I don't know if you want to pick up on any of that, Raquel. Education, I know you think is a big one. That's one of the big ones here as well. So your thoughts?
Well, all of those are important, and I think each one of us will be touched by one of them, and hopefully do something towards improving women and everyone on the planet's life by promoting and encouraging other people to join in protecting, in caring for women in education, caring for racial equality, caring for the protection of our life on planet, not just marine life. But I'm very touched by ocean literacy and also by education. But when we are in doubt of doing something, this is what I would like to leave behind. Look, leadership, that's something very important. When you're taking on a role, and I hope we all have a chance, even in our families, in the legacy we leave in our communities, just think about 2 or 3 things that are very important, and then make a decision, take action. And those are, be honest with yourself, be kind, and do no harm.
Wonderful, good way to end. Thank you very much, Raquel Martin. Thank you, and thanks to the audience. We can see them a little bit clearer now. Access to education, a big one. Oh, we just lost it, but They were good ideas, and we'll feed them into the... it's back, there we are. Climate safety for reporters, that's a good one as well. As a journalist, I can definitely speak to that. Intersectionality, climate justice, lots of interesting ideas. I hope we touched on some of them already, and I think we'll get into them again in our next and final panel. But for now, thank you very much. Raquel Martin, it's been a real pleasure to hear from you. So we're going to close out our panel discussions now by hearing from two women who do have that really profound, intimate connection with the ocean that Raquel was just talking about there. Alexia Barriere and Maya Gabeira. Now, for those of you who don't know them, Maya Gabeira is a big wave surfer, and she's also a UNESCO champion for the ocean and youth. She joins us, I hope, virtually from Portugal, where she's won this week yet another competition. So if you're with us, congratulations, Maya, and welcome. Also with us in person, Alexia Barriere, hugely celebrated French sailor. She didn't just join, but she completed the Vendée Globe. No mean feat. Here she is. This was in 2020, 2021, and she's the founder as well of the organization For My Planet. Welcome, Alexia. I'm delighted to have you, and look, your perspective matters here clearly, both of you, as sportswomen at the top of their game, but also I think really because you're both experts in the ocean. You are both leading campaigns to protect the ocean, to better understand the seas, and that's why the subhead for our conversation that we'll be having today, if you'd like this. Do you want it? Yeah. The subhead for our conversation is towards a blueprint for gender equality in sustainable ocean governance and marine sciences, because as I've said throughout our conversations today, the hope today is that we're here not just to talk, but for action. UNESCO has committed to developing this blueprint for women in the oceans. And so during our conversation, Alexia and Maya will think about some concrete recommendations for how we can improve access to scientific education for women, to leadership positions. And we want to know, I think, as well about how we can challenge some stereotypes about women and about the ocean. So lots of stuff to get into. Having said all of that, I do want your recommendations, but first, of course, we need to hear a little of both of your stories. Alexia, perhaps I'll start with you. I'm interested in your relationship with the ocean as a sailor, and perhaps how your relationship to it is different than you think men's relationship, men sailors is.
Thank you. I'm so happy to be with you today, just back from racing across the Atlantic. So
how did it go?
Very well. We didn't win, but it was a good experience.
Well done.
So I will speak in French because I'm a little tired.
My relation to the ocean. Well, I was born in Paris, and I was lucky enough, when I was 3, my parents moved to Nice on the French Riviera, right on the Mediterranean. And they took me out sailing, starting at the age of 3, with my little brother, who was only 1 month old. They took us out on a small sailing craft. It was amazing. It was great to be with my parents, to be with my family, of course, but also to be on the water and to be able to discover this infinite universe. When you're a child, it really does develop your imagination when you're out on the sea. You discover so many things. It's really impressive. And so immediately, I realized that for my own personal human balance on this blue planet was going to be more on the blue side than on the other side, the land side. And so I very quickly realized that I needed to spend as much time as I possibly could at the seaside or out on the open sea. So it is a deeply emotional bond that I feel with the sea. It's not just a slogan. For me, it really is something that gives me life balance. Now, I'm not a male skipper. I've never been one, so I can't really speak on behalf of the men out there, but I can tell you that as a woman, is that I really believe that the ocean as an element is a self-contained person who we must show respect to, and who I've shared so many of my lovely moments in life with.
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much.
Maya, let me ask you the same question. We want to hear a little of your story, your relationship with the ocean as a surfer, and how your relationship to the ocean perhaps differs from men in your sport.
Hello, everyone. Can you hear me?
We hear you.
Okay, I'm so happy to join you, even though I couldn't be in Paris today. I'm in Nazareth, having a hell of a week. And I fell in love with the ocean when I was around 13 years old. I didn't really grow up like as a kid in the ocean, and I was very intimidated at that time. When I was 13 and I first had the experience to grab onto a surfboard and try to paddle and stand up on a surfboard, I didn't know anything about the ocean. And I was very scared. And I just felt like I wanted really, really to understand that environment and join all the fun that I saw the boys having in the ocean. And that's when my love story started for surfing, but also for the ocean itself. And it continues today. I still spend most of my time in the ocean. And of course, with time, I realized all the changes and the things that humanity was doing, that we weren't really taking care of the ocean. We were depleting the resources. And that was a lot of work to be done if we wanted to turn that tide around and give what we had for the next generations, and not really give something that was used and perhaps dead for the future generations. So that's when I realized that not only I love the ocean, but I also needed to do something about it and care for it.
Thank you, Maya. Alexia, you're committed to getting more women into sailing, aren't you? You announced last year you were planning to compete for the Jules Verne Trophy with an all-women team. If I'm correct, that's never been done before. So explain to me why it's important for you to have an all-women team and what the message is you're hoping to send by doing that.
In my sport, it's really one of the rare sports where men and women can actually be in the same race and can be competing against one another directly. But that's only in theory. Actually, if you look at the high-level navigators around the world, only 5% of them are women. First, it's very difficult to do the type of race that I did in 2020, the Vendée Globe. It's just difficult for any human being, because only 60 skippers that have managed to do a solo circumnavigation of the globe without assistance over the past 30 years. And of these 60 people to have done so, only 10 of them are women. But it's also extremely difficult to go around the world as a female skipper, because over the past 30 years, no women have had the opportunity to achieve this type of athletic feat with these highly developed, speedy races where you have to manage things like on a high wire. There's a lot of stress. But women are now winning races. In fact, they've been winning races for decades. But there's still, which means that there's still no reason why we wouldn't be able to have a much stronger presence in these type of competitions. And people often ask me why this is the case. And look, I can say it's just a question of just, habits. Men invite other men because that's who they meet, and they never invite women to be parts in their crew. I don't really know if that is the reason. That's kind of a vague answer. So when I came back from the Vendée Globe, let me tell you what happened to me. I went around the world in a solo navigation, 100 days without any assistance, to then find the courage within myself to say, I can do this with a crew of women, only women. And yet there were no role models for me to project myself onto. So to some extent, it's almost as if I was going to be taking the first steps on the moon. It was just as complicated for me as it was for me to say, I'm going to do the solo trip. So it took me more time to get more experience, to mature, and to get better at finding sponsors, to actually come up with this global challenge project. And then after that, I managed to put that together. It's like, who do I want to do this with? And it's basically, as soon as I started thinking about people, it was all women. And so I thought, okay, I will have an international female crew with the best sailors from around the world. There will be 10 of us setting sail in 2025. Of course, we want to try to beat the world record, which is 43 days, and then also to do something that's been unprecedented because of its own women. So the idea is to make women around the world famous, not just us, and for us to become role models and to inspire younger generations of young women, girls, to strive to achieve their ambitions without ever wondering why there are no women in this particular field of endeavor. All it takes is just the desire and the determination to embark on such big projects. Thank you.
But I wish you luck. Thank you very much, Alexia Berrier. Maya, a similar question to you then. I think it's fair to say that surfing is also a male-dominated sport. I wonder what your experiences of it then are as a woman, and what more can be done to give women equal opportunities in surfing. You know, Alexia there was just talking about role models, about leadership. I wonder how much of that echoes with you.
Yeah, when I started in big wave surfing specifically, when I was 17, that's almost 20 years ago, I was the first professional big wave surfer in my sport. And so I had to be mentored and I had to be always around men. And that was my environment. I didn't have any woman to travel with. I didn't have any woman to train with, to share with. And I really, really missed that. So for me today, when I see the sport, and of course we have many more women in the sport today, thank God. It's so different. It's so different when you're in the water and you can see yourself. You can see other women in the water, not just men. You can compare yourself. You can be inspired. It's really different. And I urged for that when I was growing in my sport and in the ocean and in all the traveling I do for remote locations, always surrounded by men. So for me, the mentorship and to be able to welcome in a younger woman, having now the reference, now the sport has reference in the women's side, I think that's a hell of a difference. And it really helps more women to feel welcome, to feel like they belong, to feel like they want to also go on that route and become professional big wave surfers or professional surfers, or women that are comfortable in the ocean and big seas and heavy conditions. So all of that for me is very satisfying and very important. I also just love to be able to work with women. And I never had that opportunity growing up. So nowadays, every chance I get, I'm surrounded by women. And just a few days ago, I competed and it was just 2 women in the competition and I think 16 men. So I look forward to those numbers changing more in the future.
Thank you, Maya. And Alexia, I don't know very much about sailing, I have to tell you, but one thing at least I do understand is that getting sponsorship for the kind of competitions you do can be really difficult. So is it a good idea to, I don't know, have specific financing, specific funding for women-only teams like the one you're trying to organize right now?
Merci pour cette question.
Thank you for that question. Today in sailing, for certain races, there are quotas. Well, for crew races, once you have 5 people in the crew, there has to be at least 1 woman. Well, to me, that's not at all sexy, right? But at the same time, it is really cool because otherwise there would be no opportunities for women to get access to these high-level races in high-level crews. Now, I don't think it's great to have to say, look, we're going to set aside money for women crews and have quotas for that as well. But if that's the only way for things to change, then let's do it. Sourcing funding in our sport is very complicated because we're talking about millions and millions of euros. It's a mechanical sport. The boats cost a fortune. So it really is a challenge to find all the funding you need to be able to participate in these competitions. As I said, there are only about 5% of women at these high-level races around the world. And of the 5%, 5% who are women, only about 10% of those women actually make a living out of it. So it's very difficult for women to get a regular monthly income to enable to continue with our careers on an equal footing with the men. We often paid 10% of a man's salary in our sport, so that's really a problem. So when we start talking about funding for female projects, the funding should be at such a level that it enables the women to participate on an equal footing with the men instead of always trying to cobble cheaper solutions together. Now, you might say you must be happy just to be there, and of course I'm happy to be here, but if I can't, help feed my family and pay my rent and have proper training conditions and material, I'm not going to be able to have a career. So I think we're all very happy to be able to participate in a participation, but when you're in a professional, that means that you should make it your profession to be able to make a livelihood out of it. And also, we have to do a lot when it comes to balance in the portrayals, the public portrayals of men and women and their incomes in our sport. Thank you.
I just want to make sure I understood something correctly there. You're saying women get paid less?
10% of man's salary.
Wow. And Maya, I don't know if I assume you do know in surfing, is it the same? Is that something you're pushing for? Is that a change that we need to see in surfing as well?
Yeah, it's interesting for us in surfing. Actually, the prize purse is the same since 2018 now, which is a great evolution in our sport. But sponsorship is still very, very different. And because we only compete once a year in big wave surfing, we do live off our sponsorship. So that is a very important income for us. And I did notice that I was on a podium and I have one brand backing me up. And both the boys that were on the podium with me had 5 to 7 companies, each of them backing them up. So it's still a very, very different scenario if you're a woman or a man. And, not only at the top level, it worries me even more at the amateur level, at the bottom, where you're trying to build the foundation for the future. And I think, not only we have to have that same prize purse when you're winning and you're in the top, but how can you build more women to get to the top if you have nothing on the bottom for them? And that's where I think changes have to be made.
Thank you. Before we move on to some broader questions, I just want to ask you a last question about sport. And we were talking earlier in the panel with Yolanda about the value of networking. And I wonder, is it valuable? Does it seem like a useful idea to either of you to have a sort of network of sportswomen like yourselves, even though you're in different sports? Alexia, you go first.
Alors, pour répondre dans ce sens,
to answer that, being a woman and leading a project, because when we aren't able to find a place on a team, then we become a leader of our own project. And that's how we can change things. And on the famous project, taking the example of this project, the idea is that men and women will be paid equally. So that means that men are accepting a lower salary because we aren't rich enough yet to pay women on the same level as men. I think that can apply to society as a whole. When we're a woman and we become a leader, we have the power to re-establish a balance on these issues.
See, Maya, the same question to you then. The value of networking possibly between sportswomen?
Yeah, I think so. I think it would be extremely valuable, not only between sportswomen, but I think between women that are in the ocean, that work in that field. I think there's a lot that we can exchange. And I think that support system is extremely important. I think for a long time, maybe society draw women to be very competitive with each other because we had so little space to shine. And I think the opposite is necessary, for us to actually get together and promote each other and support each other. I think the strength comes from us being together rather than competitive with one another. We have so much to still fight for as far as equality and building that space for more women and for the next generation, that if we stick together, we're much, much more powerful.
Absolutely, thank you. So let's talk more broadly then. Maya already kind of got into this, Alexia, about perhaps some of the stereotypes that might exist about women, the ocean, science. What would you say that they are, and how can we challenge them? Networking's one, but perhaps some other ideas.
Currently, stereotypes in a sport like sailing, which is a mechanical sport, as I said, where we need engineers, where we need to talk about technology and data. These are sectors where women are not necessarily welcome. When there's a team and the data from the boat is analysed at the end of the day, that is to say, data to analyse performance in terms of load, wind, etc., there are still a lot of teams where women aren't invited to look at the data at the end of the day because the teams think that the women aren't going to understand the figures. So the work we need to do now is to give an opportunity to women and girls to access these areas, technology, everything to do with figures, maths, etc., and encourage them to train in these areas or to have experiences in these areas, to shake things up a bit and to change the stereotypes in these areas. And then naturally, there will be more women in these teams.
Absolutely, thank you. Maya, I don't know if you want to build on any of that in terms of how we get more women working in the ocean, in science, in ocean sport. I don't know if you think scholarships are of value, for example. You mentioned mentoring already, but what about, educational opportunities for women in the ocean?
I wish I could speak French. I'm really missing out on a lot of good information here.
Oh, sorry, Maya.
But, I don't have the translation going. But, I think for me, ocean literacy is one of the key elements. It's to educate girls and boys in the school from a very early age on what the ocean can give them, how they can interact with the ocean, all types of careers they can follow in that area and the blue economy and how the future may look for them if they go into that path. I felt very lucky that I got to know surfing, and that's how I learned everything that I know about the ocean. And I cannot see myself without that knowledge. I feel so grateful to have that knowledge. And I think every child and every kid should have that opportunity in school. There's a lot of things that we teach in school that are not very necessary. And I urge leaders to change that and to put ocean literacy there as a mandatory class through very early ages, all the way through when you go off from school. I think we have so much to learn from the ocean, and the ocean is a great, great metaphor from life. It is life itself, and it's our greatest teacher. And not to take that in is the biggest waste.
Thank you. Alexia, I don't know if you want to pick up on any of that in terms of what you think the kind of big priority should be now for that UN blueprint for women and oceans. What chimed with you there? What do we need more of?
I think there is two things important for me is giving the Maya. You saw I switch in English for you. Huh? I hope you understand with my French accent. So
thank you.
So for me, two important things. First is for sure ocean literacy education and making a big effort on that and giving the opportunity to kids to get to know the ocean with the new technology. For example, you can make, that's what we are doing today with For My Planet, with my foundation, a movie called Ocean 360 to give the opportunity to the kids who cannot go see the ocean. We bring the ocean in the schools. The idea is to give them this emotion, so they will see the resource of the ocean, the animals, but also we talk about pollution, many things. And yeah, I hope they will fall in love that way. It's the chance to have these new technologies because it's changing the game. And the second thing really important for me is giving a chance to the women of the planet to tell about their experience around ocean, even if you are not famous or a sailor or sportswoman or journalist, having a voice. And with UNESCO and the network of UNESCO, I'm sure we can bring more voices in front to talk about the ocean.
And Alexia, you mentioned your organization For My Planet. I want you to tell us a bit about the research that you're doing with it, because extraordinarily, your boat is a sort of research lab in its own right, isn't it? You're collecting data yourself. So tell us about what you're doing. And I mean, I'm interested, I don't know if this is fair, but I'm interested in whether you have faced challenges as a woman sailor doing that job, working with the scientific community.
Alors, to tell you the story, I was racing across the Atlantic in 2009. We won a race arriving in England by the coast, and I didn't want to celebrate this race. I was just about to throw up. I was sick about the amount of waste I saw in the sea. I was shocked. And I was sailing since 3 years old, so it was not the first time I saw waste at sea, but I realized that really I needed to do something for it, and I decided to start an association For My Planet, and I started to talk to the scientists and ask them, what can I do to help? So it took me 9 months to get a meeting, an appointment with a scientist, because at this time, you know, it's like 15 years ago, scientists are scientists, sailors are sailors. We don't have to talk to each other. So it was super difficult to convince them. And finally, I met this guy working at Ifremer, and he told me, cool, Alexia, you want to help us, so you can be a tool for oceanographic research. We can install on your boat some captors, sensors, to gather data at sea, because some good years I can spend 200 days at sea. So I do a lot of miles, nautical miles, so I go everywhere. And we start working like that, taking data about temperature and salinity, with sensors that doesn't affect the efficiency of my boat. And I had to bring more than millions of data with my different boats since 2010. For me, it gives me a big power when I'm at sea, when it's difficult, when I'm tired, I'm in the storm. I don't know exactly why I'm here, but thinking of this purpose, this action for oceanographic research gives me an extra power. I feel like I'm a little hero for the ocean, and I try to encourage other skippers and boats to do the same.
Okay, can I just ask you a quick follow-up then? How would we do that? How would we get more boats doing what you're doing? How could UNESCO or other multilateral bodies better support this kind of work?
UNESCO is involved on ocean racing on this topic since a long time now, and also some class of boat like IMOCA doing the Vendée Globe. You have to know that I pay for the instrument I install on board, and it's a lot of money. I pay for people in my team who are managing this program and who are working with scientists. So it's about raising money for installing sensors on the boat, and also convince the sailors and competitors that the small, tiny impact that the sensor have on your boat is nothing compared to the importance of the data we are gathering, because, for example, there is absolute absolutely no in-situ data when you go in the south, big south of the Pacific or Indian Ocean, except from the satellites who have absolutely no information. So it's really important for scientists.
Okay, so clearly more funding needed then. Maya, I want to bring you in now because you've been campaigning on a different but a certainly linked issue, which is single-use plastic, in Brazil particularly, your home country. So tell us about the efforts that are being done on that, why that issue motivates you particularly, and perhaps how we can kind of get more women involved, mobilized in that fight to protect the ocean and its ecosystems.
Yeah, in Brazil, well, I think the single-use plastic is a fight worldwide. It is one of the biggest threats we have when you think about environment. And so in Brazil, we're trying to implement this new law, which will deal with plastic and the circular economy around the plastic, banning single-use plastic, using only the minimum necessary, which is for hospitals, and really thinking about the whole life of the plastic when it's created, when it's used, and then when it's thrown away. Because when it is, when you only use it once, you can't really say that plastic is worth. It's not a good material anymore. Plastic is certainly a good material for some things, but the single-use plastic, you cannot make a case for it unless it's for hospital use only and very certain uses only in that department. So trying to cut that out because, you know, the waste pickers also supporting us, you know, it's a huge problem for them. They have to collect that microplastic, that plastic that will not be recyclable. They have to spend their own money and their own time to put it somewhere else. So we brought this concept. I mean, Oceana essentially for 2 years was working on it, really understanding the whole cycle of it, and making a point that it throughout the whole circular economy, you cannot fit in the single-use plastic for most of the purposes we use these days. And that is what we see most in the ocean these days. It does become microplastic. It's in the air, it's in our lungs, you know, it was found in most parts of our bodies, even in the heart. So it's not only a ocean health issue, but it's also our own health issue. And that's where we were trying to convince politicians to accept this new law, because it is a health issue.
Thank you, Maya. Alexia, one of the big issues we've been talking about today is ocean literacy. You've kind of touched on it already, but you are really working on that, aren't you? You're educating kids in schools here in France. I mean, first of all, what's your message? But also, again, how can we do more of it? How can we have more ocean literacy programs? How can your message reach more people? How can UNESCO help you? How can other multilateral bodies help you? Lots of questions.
Yeah, lots of questions. For me, well, I did start an educational program with For My Planet. It's because when I was a kid, so my parents are not rich, I have more chance when I'm a kid to be a president of the USA than a professional sailor when you look at it, because it's about being a woman, not being rich, and it was super difficult. So the purpose of my speech talk with the kids is giving them a new vision of their life, saying that you can be whatever you want in life. For sure, you have to work super hard, and even harder in certain conditions, but you can do whatever you want. And for me, it's super important. Today, we have lots of catastrophes, difficulties on the planet, and for the kids, it's super heavy. But yeah, giving them some optimism and some energy so they can go through their dreams like I did. It's the first thing. And second thing, for sure, it's giving them the opportunity to fall in love with our planet and, yeah, take care of the planet. But for that, first, they have to be able to take care of themselves and then be involved on more environmental projects.
Absolutely. And Maya, same question to you. You're also working on ocean literacy. You've written a book for kids. So what's your message particularly to young girls? And again, how do we get that message to reach more young people?
For me, the book, I first wrote Maya and the Beast, which is basically the story of a little girl, the story of my life. And my biggest message was, how the ocean entered my life, and it was not meant to be. And everyone told me that as a girl, I should not be aiming to conquer those waves and to surf. I had asthma. So it was many obstacles, and I just kept going because of the passion I had for surfing, for the ocean. So it's kind of my first book is an introduction for the passion I have for the ocean and what the ocean can mean to kids. And then the second book that's going to come out this year, that's when I touch more into ocean conservation. So I wrote the second book. It's called Maya Makes Waves. And that is where I share some of my encounters with the marine life, with things that I've seen, with the troubles I see in the sea these days, and I call them to take action. So I love sharing my passion with kids, and I love being able to talk to them about the ocean, because I think that the first thing is to fall in love for the ocean, and then you care for it. You got to know what it is that you're caring for. You got to love it to care for it. And so for me, it's both books are just an introduction and an experience to share with kids what the ocean is for me and what it could be for them.
Thank you. We're going to wrap up in a moment. I just want to ask you both a final question and your thoughts on what's really our theme today, which is that we can't have climate justice without achieving or fighting for greater gender equality, and that kind of the interplay, the intersection between those two. Maya, perhaps we'll come to you first, and then Alexia afterwards.
Yeah, we have to take into account that without gender equality, we will not fix the biggest problems in humanity, which one of them is ocean health. And so there is not one discussion without the other. And I think that's the importance of us being here today, is that we can't separate both issues, gender equality and ocean conservation. So we got to work on both simultaneously and understand that the most vulnerable are kids and women in every disaster and every flood and every impact that climate change is having and will continue to have. So to have a framework to invest in women, to invest in ocean literacy, to have mentorship programs, to build a community of women that have platforms and don't have platforms, but are around the ocean, know the ocean, are caring for the ocean is essential.
Thank you, Maya. And Alexia, let's close with you then. Your thoughts then on that theme, the interplay between climate justice and gender justice.
I think what I see today is super positive, and for me, one of the solutions is about working together, men and women, collaboration, respect each other, understanding each other, understanding the planet, and respect the planet, and give a voice to the woman, and also give a voice to the kids, because they are so powerful and they have so many ideas.
Thank you very much. Good moment to end it with the kids, those who will inherit our planet. Thank you very much. Alexia Verrier, Maya Guevara as well. It's been a real pleasure to hear from both of you. Thank you very much indeed. Well, thank you all very much indeed. It's been, at least for me, a really fascinating couple of conversations. And we're going to wrap up now with some final thoughts. I'm very pleased to welcome to the stage Vladimir Ryabinin. He's the Assistant Director General for the Intergovernmental Oceanographic Commission here at UNESCO. Welcome, sir. You have the floor.
Thank you very much, Nadia. So, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, all courtesies, like we say in IOC, are observed. And greetings from the Intergovernmental Geographic Commission of UNESCO, or IOC, the home, I would say also hope, of ocean sciences in the United Nations system. So my job today is to summarize the discussion. This very important, actually excellent forum focused on climate change and on the International Day of Women in Multilateralism. But let me start with one observation. I'm sure obvious for all. Nadia, it has been excellent, truly excellent convening. I'm also equally impressed with talent of women, men participating. And I would like also to say that I'm very glad to hear many people speaking about the ocean. Varsha, Yolanda, Raquel, Alexia, Maya, this is absolutely wonderful. So one of the highlights for me today was the vision and sense of humor of Nisreen. You can smile. So it was particularly when she was speaking about her husband, about the single task and multitasking computer. I need to confess, similar discussions take place in my family. And because I'm like an old professor or an old processor, able to think only about one thing at one time. So in order to try to think about one box, I needed help from a woman. And for this meeting, I wish to recognize here a very important contribution that comes from Dr. Kirsten Isenzee, who is sitting in this room. She is a scientist, a team member of IOC of UNESCO, and the IOC focal point for gender equality. Thanks, Kirsten. So, first of all, general scientific comment from me. As I'm an ocean and climate scientist, about the root cause of climate change. Due to many physical, chemical, biological processes, including the fact that the greenhouse gases play a key role here, and that was exactly what that young man said, fantastically. So, the temperature and the carbon in the Earth system are connected on subgeological time scales. Sometimes temperature changes because of the astronomic factors, but now we, humanity, basically pumped carbon in the atmosphere. Because of that, temperature is also increasing. So the issue, of course, is coming through natural processes, but this is a societal issue. So, in other words, problems in society through a combination of natural processes resulting in climate change result also in major impact on the society itself. So in order to address climate change, we first need to correct issues in the society. So let me ask you a question. What is the largest disbalance, almost affecting half of the humanity? Gender inequality. So this is a correct observation, but it's not specific enough to address the problem. The specificity comes from the fact that this is that half of the population, the female half of population, that is more impacted by climate change. I have to say that this conclusion is also confirmed by our own observations in IOC, for example, in relation to vulnerability to tsunami disasters. So having half of the humankind strongly affected by climate change, leading the societal part of the climate solution is clearly a correct management solution of organizing the fight against climate change. So how shall we start rectifying the problem? I think we need to be good social scientists. Every science is based on observations. And we cannot manage what we cannot measure. In that sense, the climate debate can really benefit from the experiences that we also had today in ocean sciences. I was very happy to hear today many references to those advances. And I will speak about this a little bit. So gender balance is a very important issue for ocean sciences. And this is exactly where information now comes from Kirsten, a staff member of IOC. In the IOC Global Ocean Science Report, which is one of our key products, we were able to estimate the percentage of women in ocean sciences. That percentage was quoted here several times. This is 38%. So what is, of course, and also we heard from Varsha that it may be different in different countries, although different to different communities and institutes. But globally, this percentage, 38%, is significantly, I would say statistically significantly higher than in other types of sciences. But still, 38% is a minority. Let me now report what we have done. We have not done it alone, and you already heard what ICES, International Council for Exploration of the Sea, was doing. So we basically, first of all, expressed a commitment. It was actually done at the United Nations Ocean Conference in New York. And we made actually the gender equality a key principle of the United Nations Decade of Ocean Science for Sustainable Development, which is coordinated by OSCE. So all endorsed decade actions are required to demonstrate how they are actively working to promote gender equality, and all decade governance and coordination structures have a strict requirement for gender equality. The flagship Ocean Decade program, Empowering Women for Ocean Decade, led by the World Maritime University, is the centerpiece of a portfolio of decade actions. The decade started in 2021, so we are now in the 4th year of the decade. 1/3 of the time has passed, and this started during the COVID pandemic. However, the results started to emerge, and I would like to say that the recent report on Ocean Decade tells us that already 56% of the individuals involved in the Ocean Decade are women. This is already a majority. So that is a big step forward. And however, while this is a progress, I will have to report that women are still very highly underrepresented in senior positions in ocean sciences. This is definitely an additional issue required attention. And we, to that extent and so many other purposes, are supporting the project which is called Women from the Sea. This is a decade project. You heard and you saw something from this project. So with our partners from Canada, Portugal, we are launching also an online Ocean Decade Gender Forum, which will provide unique opportunities for women to connect, create new opportunities, collaborate, and identify new avenues for ocean science and action. So let me call on you all, please, to become a member of this Ocean Decade Gender Forum and make that group a resource and a platform for knowledge exchange, for experience and resource sharing, for the developments of new opportunities to provide equal opportunities for women in ocean sciences. But we will not stop there, and this forum will also create the foundation for the future establishment of the Ocean Decade Gender Task Force. And that task force will develop the blueprint, gender blueprint for the Ocean Decade. And more details on this task force will be announced during the Ocean Decade conference that is going to take place in Barcelona in April. And it will include numerous activities and discussion on gender issues. So I'm concluding, almost concluding now. So first of all, IC is I think, known for setting ambitious goals and even implementing those ambitious goals. So, for example, we now are measuring the depths of the ocean. This project started by Prince Albert I in 1903, and by 2016 we have slightly more than 5% of the ocean area mapped with good resolution. Together with some key partners, we were able to amplify this, and now in only 7 years, after 113 years of almost inaction, we have measured 25% of the ocean depths. We are setting a very ambitious goal of having all communities, coastal communities that may be suffering from tsunami, ready for tsunami. This will be done by 2030. In 2003, we conducted a conference on maritime spatial planning. That was the time when people didn't know how they can organize the work in the ocean. Now, maritime spatial planning is used in more than 100 countries. You heard about ocean literacy. We started this massive acceleration of ocean literacy in 2017, and now it is becoming, in some countries, a part of the formal school education. People will know more about the ocean. And of course, once again, coming to the decade. The decade has grown into the largest undertaking in ocean science ever in the history of humankind, but it is equitable and also ethical. So if in 2016 only a few people were thinking about the decade, we have now 1,800 people working for the decade, and as you heard, 56% are women. So I think we can achieve everything if we try. As Nelson Mandela once said, it seems impossible until it is done. So we can do it. Thank you.
it's very nearly time to wrap up, but before we do, UNESCO wants to give the floor to the country that initiated the whole idea for this day, the International Day of Women in Multilateralism. That country is Gabon, and so I'm very pleased to welcome now to the stage André Jacques Augin. He's the Minister for Culture, Youth, Sports and the Arts in Gabon. Welcome, sir.
Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, ambassadors, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, dear panelists, ladies and gentlemen, I would like to begin by bringing to you the greetings of health and happiness to all of you and your families. In my capacity as the Minister of Culture, Youth and Sports and Arts, representative of His Excellency the Minister of Foreign Affairs for sub-regional integration of Gabon, it's a pleasure for me to express to you on behalf of His Excellency Monsieur the President of Transition, President of the Republic, Head of State, Brigadier General Maurice Clotaire Oligui Nguema. The entire Gabonese people, and on my own behalf, we would like to express our gratitude for the honor bestowed upon Gabon to take the floor on the occasion of this exceptional event celebrating women in multilateralism. I would like to express my deep gratitude as well to Madame Audrey Azoulay, the Director General of UNESCO, for this invitation to attend in this illustrious institution this third celebration of our day, which was proposed by Gabon in 2021. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, it is with enthusiasm that I wish to welcome the panel of eminent personalities who are with us today, brought together to resolutely reaffirm gender equality in the pressing context of the climate emergency. My country, Gabon, is very proud to have proposed this International Day, thereby creating a privileged space for dialogue and exchange on the various perspectives linked to general equality in the multilateral context, and more particularly today as an imperative solution to the climate problem. I would like to recall the ambitious commitments made by my country to preserve the environment facing the major challenges of our times, climate change and sustainable development and biodiversity. Ladies and gentlemen, there's nothing more human, no more essential for humanity than to mobilize not only men and women, but all our scientific, educational, and cultural resources to preserve our planet so that it may continue to protect us and future generations. Every crisis we face, be it COVID-19, poverty, hunger, or crises linked to biodiversity, the ocean, or the climate, impacts women most severely. And as we alter natural ecosystems, everyday tasks such as providing water, food, and fuel, as well as sustaining subsistence farming. Often these are tasks that are undertaken by women and girls, and these tasks become themselves longer, more difficult, and in some cases insurmountable. The ideas and solutions discussed throughout this International Day are therefore crucial to our collective commitment to gender equality in the context of the climate emergency. In Gabon, as in many developing countries, we are experiencing these upheavals. And in response, we are ensuring that the entire population, especially young people and women, participate in the sustainable management of the country's natural resources and benefit from the fruits of a controlled transition to a sustainable and resilient green economy. Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, gender equality in a world in the throes of a climate crisis must be the foundation of our common future. And this is because every generation sees the emergence of young people and women who, through their commitment, are shaking up the established order and building a more sustainable world. And this is the true meaning of the words of the Senegalese writer Mariama Ba. And I quote, "Women are the true builders of the world, for they shape the destiny of future generations." This statement resonates as a profound conviction, recognizing that women, as guardians of life and community, have the power to redefine our collective trajectory. It is therefore imperative to fully integrate the voices of women, bearers of wisdom, knowledge, and experience, into our commitments to tackle climate change, so that together we can find the sustainable solutions that are required. Therefore, women in multilateralism have a crucial role to play in promoting science, culture, education, peace, and development on a global scale. Their participation in global governance, since they do represent 51% of humanity, is a question of equity, but also of efficiency. For without them, there will be no growth, no prosperity, no peace. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, in conclusion, I would like to reiterate the inspiring words of the President of the Gabonese Republic, His Excellency Brice Clotaire Oligui Nguema, spoken at COP28 when he expressed the wish that the unity of humankind in the face of climate change should not remain just an aspiration, but become concerted action. So, let us work together to build a richer, more resilient world. Let us join forces. Let us adopt innovative solutions and put the preservation of our planet at the heart of our concerns. In this way, we will have the power to shape a future where prosperity and sustainability are the foundations of our life together. Thank you all. Thank you for your commitment and determination to this crucial cause. Thank you for your kind attention.
Merci beaucoup. Thank you very much. Well, we're coming to the end, but last, certainly not least though, Begonia Lasagabasca is going to speak to us now. She's the Director of the Gender Equality Division here at UNESCO. Welcome.
Well, I think that the people that has, particularly, I would say, the young panelists and the not so young, but have been amazing. I just have one word, thank you, merci, gracias, shukran. It has been a pleasure. I think that I have to thank Nadia, of course. I think I have to thank all the division, the gender division, that has done an amazing work. That we are very few people, but we try our best. And this is not the end, this is the start of what are we really going to do. So all of you have been there in following us virtually. All of you have come here, thank you also. But go home, think about what could we do more, better, because It's not that this is urgent, it's that this is beyond urgent. So all the ideas, there are no bad ideas, never. And we have to do things differently. So think about, what do you think you could do? Something, one thing, a small thing, big thing, medium thing, and share it with us. Because I'm sure that these ideas will be amazing to do things differently. We cannot continue doing the same things we have done that are not going in change. They're not changing things. And maybe, as somebody was saying, half of the intelligence of the planet, may have good, new, different ideas. So, to be continued. Thank you.
That really is it now. Thank you all very much. Time for lunch, I guess. Thank you.